Life is offered unto you, hallelujah. Eternal life thy soul shall have. If you only look to him, hallelujah. Look to Jesus who alone can save. Look at him, my brother, look at him. Look to Jesus now and live. 'Tis recorded in his word, hallelujah. It is only that you look and live. Look at him, my brother, look at him. Look to Jesus now and live. 'Tis recorded in his word, hallelujah. It is only that you look and live. Kenya ni nchi yangu, oh Kenya ni nchi yangu, Kenya ni nchi yangu, milele na milele. Naipenda Kenya, kwa moyo wangu wote nitaishi Kenya, maisha yangu yote. Naipenda Kenya, kwa moyo wangu wote nitaishi Kenya, maisha yangu yote. Mimi ni mwana Kenya, mimi ni mzalendo, naona fahari kuishi kwetu Kenya. Mimi ni mwana Kenya, nina furaha kuona maendeleo ya nchi yangu Kenya, kuona maendeleo ya nchi yangu Kenya. Amani, umoja, ndugu ulio hapa Kenya. Ni wajibu wa kila mwananchi kuitafuta amani kila siku. Hivyo ndivyo maendeleo yetu yatapanda vizazi na vizazi. Ni wajibu wa kila mwananchi kuitafuta amani kila siku. Hivyo ndivyo maendeleo yetu yatapanda vizazi na vizazi. Si muhimu tulinde umoja wetu, juhudi zetu pamoja zionyeshe zalendo wetu. Mimi ni mwana Kenya, mimi ni mzalendo, naona fahari kuishi kwetu Kenya. Mimi ni mwana Kenya, nina furaha kuona maendeleo ya nchi yangu Kenya, kuona maendeleo ya nchi yangu Kenya. Amani, umoja, ndugu ulio hapa Kenya. Ni wajibu wa kila mwananchi kuitafuta amani kila siku. Hivyo ndivyo maendeleo yetu yatapanda vizazi na vizazi. Ni wajibu wa kila mwananchi kuitafuta amani kila siku. Hivyo ndivyo maendeleo yetu Wajivunie sana tukijiita Wakenya, nchi yenye baraka. Kenya nchi yenye baraka. Kenya nchi yenye baraka. Kenya makao yetu ni nchi ya usalama, kamwe hatutaiacha. Kamwe Kenya anayependa Kenya ni yule mwenye kutenda haki kwa watu wote. Mtu mwenye kutenda haki. Mtu mwenye kutenda haki. Na ukipenda Kenya ujitengane na mambo yenye kuvunja amani. Wenzangu, Kenya kipenzi chetu, hatutaiacha milele daima. Kenya kipenzi chetu, hatutaiacha milele daima. Kenya kipenzi changu ni yenye upendo, hatutaacha Kenya daima na milele. Kenya kipenzi chetu, hatutaiacha milele daima. Kenya kipenzi chetu, hatutaiacha milele daima. Na tumeapa sote wananchi wa Kenya, kutumikia Kenya daima na milele. Kenya kipenzi chetu, hatutaiacha milele daima. Kenya kipenzi chetu, hatutaiacha milele daima. Kenya ni mama yetu, tena ni baba yetu, hatutaacha Kenya daima na milele. Kenya kipenzi chetu, hatutaiacha milele daima. Kenya kipenzi chetu, hatutaiacha milele daima. Sitaiacha Kenya nchi yangu, mimi ni mwana Kenya daima. Nikienda ng'ambo nitarudi, mimi ni mwana Kenya daima. Sitadanganywa kamwe na wageni, mimi ni mwana Kenya daima. Wala sitapotoshwa na wabaya, mimi ni mwana Kenya daima. Sitaiacha Kenya nchi yangu, mimi ni mwana Kenya daima. Na nikienda ng'ambo nitarudi, mimi ni mwana Kenya daima.
Good afternoon. Welcome to this afternoon session. I want to thank you for making it back from lunch in very good time. And I want to apologize for the delay of the beginning of this session. There is a very small change. We were meant to start with the official opening ceremony, but due to some changes with the arrival schedule of some of our guests, we have flipped the program around. And I'm very sure you'll be happy with that as well, because what we are doing is to bring forth the session number 3 on enhancing customs systems for efficiency in trade facilitation. This panel will continue for the next 1 hour, and then we'll proceed to the formal opening of this national annual tax summit organized by the KRA. So without much ado, I would like to introduce the team that will lead us in this conversation this afternoon. We do have, as our panelists, Mr. Julius Musyoki, who is Commissioner for Customs and Border Control, Kenya Revenue Authority. If you can just wave so that you can again receive a warm round of applause. Thank you very much. We do have the Chief Executive Officer of the Kenya Private Sector Alliance, Ms. Carol Kariuki. We also do have Mr. Peter Kibet Biwot, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Export Promotion Council, rather. And finally, but not least, we do have Ms. Phyllis Wakiaga, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, KM. Phyllis also doubles up as our moderator for the afternoon session, so she'll be engaging the panelists as well as yourselves right there in the audience. But before she does that, it's my honor and pleasure to introduce Julius Musyoki, Commissioner of Customs and Border Control, KRA, to make a brief presentation that will then lead to the panel discussion, which after his presentation, Phyllis shall lead. Let's put together our hands for Commissioner Musyoki.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I'll take some time to walk us through the topic of this afternoon, that is enhancing customs systems for efficiency in trade facilitation. In view of the time allocated, I'll be very brief, and I'll try to avoid technical and details that might not be very useful for non-customs officers. I'll start by giving a global overview. Then I'll come down to regional and then national, so that we can see how what we are doing to enhance trade facilitation fits into the global customs organizations and the membership, which is currently 84. Our mandate is quite obvious. We are supposed to collect revenue, secure trade, and facilitate trade. We are supposed to compile data and trade statistics, of course, in addition to protecting society. These are the traditional roles of customs. But in the advent of many threats across the globe, customs has reviewed its mandate to give prominence to security. And Kenya has been among the first departments of customs to give this function great prominence, creating a division that is responsible for this role, so that we can create an environment that is conducive to business. I'll be talking about it shortly. Now, customs is managed through protocols, tools, and programs that are developed by the overseeing body, which is the World Customs Organization. And therefore, what we do as customs in Kenya is similarly replicated by other customs bodies across the world, because these protocols and the tools are standard, and they are aimed at creating efficiency, simplifying processes, and therefore they're expected to be standard, and therefore the WCO normally coordinates and organizes customs organizations in forums where they share their experiences to be able to bring up the organizations that are not at par. And therefore, as of now, we are looking at customs of the 21st century, and the tools that we look at are universal, and I'll be mentioning a few in passing. We are guided by, among them, the Kyoto Convention, which is familiar to some of you. We are also members of the WTO. This is mainly a trade aspect, but trade and customs work together, as I'll be talking about it shortly, in terms of the collaboration between business and customs. You know the various agreements that we have in East Africa that bring us together, the protocols, the acts, and the regulations, among others. All these are aimed at developing policies and procedures that meet our mandate, which I mentioned include safety and security. Security in terms of the people who are consuming the goods that are coming through, safety in handling some of the dangerous goods, and also security in terms of stopping harmful products that could be used to make harmful weapons or other undesirable items. And we do this through use of modern tools, and I'll be briefly talking about it where we are in customs. We also have international guidelines, among them data models that give us the standard data that should be availed in the declaration, so that every organization is able to understand and comprehend and also propagate the declarations by other organizations. Now, if I can mention briefly the instruments that we have in passing, they'll be looking at the SAFE framework of standards. This is the standard that is the framework that gives standards that should be applied across the country, across the organizations, the customs organizations. And there are quite a number. I'll not go into them, but key among them that will be feeding into what we'll be discussing today is the risk management, which is aimed at ensuring that we don't intervene and verify all cargo that's coming into the country. We have to use risk profiling, and this is facilitated by what I'll be talking in terms of trade facilitation tools, including the pre-arrival, advanced information, non-intrusive inspection, where we use the scanners, etc. All these are aimed at making sure that we spend less time doing the physical checks. We spend less time intervening, and therefore, cargo clearance time is reduced. And this is the basis on which Kenya is trying to achieve, under customs, the port charter program, which is signed by the stakeholders at the port. Customs is key among them because we are the people who initiate the process of clearing cargo, and therefore our contribution to that is quite key, and we are expected by the end of next year to be having 70% of our cargo pre-cleared. And this is aimed at what I mentioned as trade facilitation. Allow me to just mention a few of the pillars that we'll be discussing maybe during the panel discussions in terms of the trade facilitation. I've mentioned the reduction in delays and costs, which accrue to the importers when we don't waste a lot of time. We don't spend a lot of time on the road. We don't spend a lot of time in the interventions at the port, etc. And this one, again, we also do it through the custom-to-custom cooperation and partnership. That is exchanging information, the risk initiatives, and also intelligence, among others. Now, for Kenya, I'll focus on to Kenya very briefly. We have the main initiatives as the automation processes. In customs, we have declarations done through our system. We call it Simba system. This is a system that we adopted in 2005, but in the spirit of improving technology and enhancing efficiency, we have developed a system that we expect to roll out, which you are seeing on the screen, ICMS. This is Integrated Customs Management System. This system is a system that is robust. We expect this system to integrate with all the stakeholders, right from the shipping lines, right from the clearing agents, right to the partner government agents, including KEBS, KEFIS, Kenya Post Authority, all those. And therefore, we avoid the current situation where we have standalone systems. This is aimed at creating a one-stop processing shop for the declarants. It will be so robust that we'll be eliminating most of the physical interventions by the human beings currently. And therefore, as I mentioned earlier, we'll be depending on the risk profiling so that when cargo is shipped into the country, we'll have that information, we'll have done our profiling, and we'll be able to separate cargo that is due for pre-arrival clearance. Pre-arrival clearance means your cargo is checked and the documents are verified and cleared so that by the time the cargo arrives, we just let you take your cargo from the port direct to your destination, and if need be, we do what we call post-clearance audit. In that category, we have the authorized economic operator. These are the vetted, cleared importers who have been found to be compliant, and we facilitate that clearance under this arrangement of pre-arrival. And therefore, less time, no interventions, and if need be, we do it at your destination as post-clearance. We have the integrated scanner management. Again, this is an non-intrusive inspection tool. We have 9 currently, and the essence of this is, as guided by the instruments and the WCO, is to avoid physical manual interventions. And therefore, you focus on the risk cargo and let flow cargo that is compliant. Then under the East Africa community, you are aware we have gone into the single customs territory arrangement, where cargo imported for the partner states is cleared at the first point of entry. This was implemented from 2014, and currently we have our partner states officers sitting with officers in Mombasa so that their cargo is intervened by themselves and they ensure release of the same, thereby saving a lot of time, time that Customs Kenya would have spent in doing that work for them under the transit arrangements. And this has also helped us a lot in terms of preventing the diversion of cargo that was meant to go out of the country. I'll be talking about the measures that we have put in place to mitigate the regimes under transit that are still existing. Very quickly, I'll show some pictorial images of where we've come from and why we are moving to where we are going. The ICMS, the scanners, the regional electronic cargo tracking system is because in the inception in the early 90s, we were operating in an environment of long queues, volumes of paperwork. You can see them on the screen. We had congestions at the port, as you can see that slide. We had many documents, a bunch of documents which were manually processed. I'll not go into details, but those are declaration documents that you'll be seeing shortly. We used to have about 10 copies of each document, and the people who are in clearing can understand the challenges that used to exist. But gradually we adopted the single entry declaration, which is the document to the right. Gradually then we had to get rid of the manual processes. We implemented the first system in the 90s. It was called the BOFIN system. It was semi-auto. You have to capture the documents partially and then feed them into the system from the presented documents by the agent. And gradually in 2005, we moved to SIMBA system. SIMBA system has served us very well. We improved on its performance by putting it or placing it on a modern platform. And right now we are in the process of phasing out and adopting the latest technology, the ICMS, Integrated Customs Management System. And without going into a lot of details because of the time given, the ICMS, as I mentioned, is going to integrate and automate the whole of the cargo clearance process from start to end. It will also integrate with all the other systems that are currently standalone. When you talk of the scanners, when you talk of the regional electronic cargo tracking system, when you talk of the CCTV, all those will be integrated under the ICMS and therefore give us a one-stop view of all the transactions. And then to point for the declarations is also integrated here under the Kenya National Single Window so that the agents have one single point of entry into the customs system. And of course, I mentioned the interlinkage with the other government agencies. We are integrated. And therefore, the benefits will be the ease of doing business, efficiency in cargo clearance, engineering the processes, reduction in the complexity associated with several systems, and then, of course, the current system has performance and security challenges which are going to be addressed. Without going to details, those are the various systems that we'll integrate with. I've mentioned some of them. Allow me not to go into all of them. So that is the integrated customs management system. And once we roll it out by end of December, we expect efficiency to be at very high levels, almost 100%. Then the other system I wish to talk about, because it also fits into the facilitation of trade that we'll be talking about, is the cargo tracking system. We are calling it Regional Electronic Cargo Tracking System because it's a system that has been adopted by the EAC partner states. We are sharing their seals, and each partner state has a command center which is identical to each other. We communicate real time on them with each other, and the tracking is done seamlessly from the port of Mombasa to the final destination of the cargo. Unlike previously, when the cargo used to be, the seal used to be disarmed at the border between Kenya and Uganda, between Uganda and Rwanda, etc. But now it is one way from, all the way from Mombasa to the point of destination. And this has eliminated the need for physical escorts that were there. It has eliminated the need for the checkpoints that have been there, physical checkpoints. And as a result, trade time taken to transport cargo from Mombasa to Kampala has reduced from an average of 6 days to an average of 3 days. To Rwanda, it has reduced from an average of 8 days to an average of 4-5 days. And it's so precise that interference with the cargo on transit has been reduced to almost zero. It's not like the older systems where alerts were not well coordinated or well transmitted. This is real time. You stop, we see you. We know this, we can see the speed at which you are moving. We can tell where you are. And when you go off route, the system triggers an alert. And our rapid response team, which you'll see on the screen, will be with you. This rapid response unit is located in 5 places along the corridor. And why I'm saying this is for the benefit of our colleagues from the partner states. This ensures the security and safety of the cargo to destination without fear of losing it. Then the final one is the SGR. This is another project that Customs is taking very seriously because it has got a very major national implication in terms of development and trade. The first train was launched on Mandaraka Day, you recall, and much work has been done to the extent that come early the first week of December, we expect to commence the operations for the cargo. Currently, you are aware it's only the passenger train that's working. There has been a lot of work that was being done, and this is a joint effort between Kenya Railway Corporation, Kenya Revenue Authority, Kenya Post Authority, and the other government agencies that have interest in cargo. And therefore, by bringing all these partners together, we expect this station, the ICD, to be an efficient port that supersedes the current status in Mombasa. We don't expect to be a storage area. We expect it to be a place where cargo arrives and is evacuated in hours. Having said that, we are doing pre-clearance. We expect this cargo to arrive, land, and be loaded onto a truck to the owner's premises. In the event there is need for interventions, we have also sensitized our stakeholders so that we have to do one-stop intervention so that if it's SCEFIS, they have to input their requirements in advance through our ICMS system so that when KPA, KRI is intervening, they also intervene so that you don't have disjointed interventions. And that again fits into the tenets of the instruments that I talked about under the WCO. And then finally, we have the command center. The cargo command center has been constructed, and we expect this to bring together and supervise the activities on the ground. It will integrate all the scanners on the ground in Mombasa, in Nairobi, in Kisumu, in Eldoret, and therefore we'll have a common view by somebody based in Nairobi who is not biased. And this again fits into what we'll be discussing as per the schedule. That transparency, that accountability and the separation of duties such that we don't have monopoly, which brings discretion, and we know those are ingredients for integrity issues. So in summary, those are the issues I wanted to highlight, and maybe the other aspects will come out during the panel discussions. I've rushed through because of the time, but we should be able to discuss them during the plenary. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Julius Musyoki. I think he's shared with us extensively the role of KRA. Before we dig into the discussion, allow me just to contextualize the discussion a little bit more. We are discussing the role of customs in facilitating and implementing the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement, which entered into force on 22nd February 2017. And as at March this year, about 69 or 70% of the World Trade Organization members had ratified the agreement. What the Trade Facilitation Agreement is for us, it's a positive reminder that countries around the globe are actually committed to improving the international trading system and also promoting free trade. And I think this has happened over the last 20 years, where we've really seen the international community making significant progress in dismantling the barriers to trade. We saw the applied tariffs being reduced or eliminated, quotas were removed, FTAs were also being signed around the world, and also developing countries started to trade more. So the period between the year 2000 and 2008, the world trade actually increased by about 10%. However, after the financial crisis in 2009, we saw that dropping. And if you've been following the international trends, there have been certain things like the Brexit referendum, the US decision not to ratify the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the recent calls to dismantle also the North American Free Trade Area, and closer home, the non-tariff barriers that continue to increase around the region and the continent. So with this background, it's actually difficult to predict how the global trade architecture will evolve in the next few years. And we might witness a lot more protectionism coming from different countries. And maybe the mega trade agreements will be changing, and China will continue to be a dominant factor in this discussion. So back to the reason why the Trade Facilitation Agreement is important. It doesn't require any further negotiation. Countries are committed to implementing it. And in this climate, it's actually more politically feasible to implement it. So it's really targeting to reduce the issues of transparency, duplication in documents, and all those issues. So I think that really brings us to the discussion we are having on how enhancing customs system for efficiency can lead to better trade facilitation. And Mr. Musyoki has shared with us a lot of what KRA is doing in this regards. He's spoken about the risk management, the fact that they are reducing the amount of interference they have when cargo is coming through. He's also talked about the port charter, and I'd be very interested because I know KEPSA is one of the signatories. What are some of the things that we are doing? Is it working? It was launched with a lot of pomp and glamour, but has it really delivered what we wanted it to do? He's also given us a lot of background in terms of how KRA has automated over the years, up to where they have the cargo tracking system in place, they have a cargo command center, the rapid response team. They're now moving from the SIMBA system to the integrated customs management system. A lot of positive development. But really now to the people on the panel, Caro, on behalf of the business community, are these initiatives having an impact, and what more can KRA do to continue to contribute in its role as the person who's collecting revenue and enhancing trade facilitation for Kenya?
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. It's really good to hear just the different steps that KRA has taken, especially on issues customs. I think if you look at news for the last many years, I think if there's anything that business has always raised and complained about when it comes to regional trade, cross-border trade, imports and exports, has always been the issue around customs. What was mentioned around a single window system, it's something that we have pushed for. I think I remember our very first meetings with former President Kibaki in 2007 when we started talking about the single window system. So to see that we are there now, for me, I think it's a great achievement. Maybe before even I talk about the impact, let me just mention something that I think many times it's hard to blow your own trumpet, and KRA may not just talk about some of the things that they've achieved on the ease of doing business. And because we do partner with government on the issue of the ease of doing business, the World Bank Index, we've seen a lot of progress. And I'll just give you some numbers so that you see that the things they're doing, what the results are. And one, on the 2016 Logistics Performance Report by the World Bank, Kenya ranks position 39 on customs efficiency from position 151 in 2014. Yeah. Rwanda, which has been so efficient in many ways, ranks 52 from 89. So we've even overtaken Rwanda. Tanzania, 60 from 135. Uganda, 51. Burundi is lagging a bit behind, 137. But that's good news. On the ease of trade across borders, according to the World Bank Ease of Doing Business 2018 report, the EAC regional average for ease of trade across borders is position 133. Rwanda at 87, Kenya at position 106, Uganda 127, Burundi 164, Tanzania 182 out of 190 countries. Again, between Kenya and Rwanda, you can see there's been so much improvement. Again, on the ease of paying taxes, Kenya has improved by 74 positions in the ease of paying taxes from 166 to 92 between 2014 and 2018. The number of payments has reduced from 41 to 26, and the time spent paying taxes has reduced from 308 hours to 185 due to the operationalization of iTax. Those are some of the things that we don't see, but many times Kenyans will ask, what does that really mean when we change those numbers? And one is the cost. Because the longer it takes for any of this movement, it means the cost of goods and services to all of us is high. Because the cost, when it's high cost for business, it gets to the customer. So when we change this, that means even at the end of the day, the customer pays much cheaper for the goods. And we all want cheaper goods, affordable goods. Secondly is employment. When the costs are high for organizations, what happens? You know, the impact again is on employment. So the more there is ease of doing business and the custom facilitation is big, it means these organizations that deal with import, with exports, can retain their staff, can continue to grow, can continue to expand. And third, it's a whole integration. We've really been talking about integration of EAC. We have the customs, we have the common market protocol, we have the customs protocol, but these are things that we sign, and a lot of the people in the public say, okay, so you signed a protocol, what does that do? You know, and these are some of the achievements that focusing on that really improves. And going back to what Phyllis has asked on the issue of the port charter, it's true. The president did launch this in 2014 with a lot of glamour in Mombasa, and a lot of us from the private, there was us private sector, Kenya private sector rallying the rest of the private sector organizations, and then different organizations that are affected by, that affect customs or affect exports and imports. And KRA was in the middle of all this, because at the end of the day, what happens at the port of Mombasa and at the cross-border, KRA is a big player. And some of those things that I've mentioned on the ease of doing business has been the results of that port charter. And some of that has not even been captured by the index, but even just the time it takes, as the commissioner mentioned, of goods moving from Kenya to Uganda to Rwanda, reducing those number of days, again, it's a great achievement, because it means that you can get your goods much cheaper, you can get, things can move much faster, and then you don't have to wait. Many times we hear, remember this time when the government was talking about maize in the high seas and all that, if we had the same old systems at the customs, it would have meant that you and I would have waited for that maize for much longer than we had to wait. So again, it's always to translate to say, what do these things mean for the common mwananchi? And this is what it means when there's facilitation in KRA.
Thank you very much, Caro. I think Caro has really painted the picture of the impact of some of the things Commissioner Musyoki spoke about. When you see the ranking improve, it's not just the number, but actually the fact that you're improving trade facilitation, creating jobs, and making goods move much faster. So in the context of exports, I know one of the priorities we have as a country is really to grow the exports out of the country, and the trade facilitation is at the center of our export performance. Carol spoke about the ease of trade across borders, where we are, I think, position 106, meaning that there is room for improvement in that specific indicator. So I want to bring in Mr. Peter Biwott into the conversation. From where you sit in the Export Promotion Council, what is the role of trade facilitation, and how do we ensure that exports from Kenya are growing within the region and internationally?
Thank you, Phyllis, and thank you for inviting us to this forum. Probably maybe I need to start by discussing on the motto or on the theme of the third annual tax summit, where we are talking about sustainable economic development. So what does that mean? Because then as a country, we have our own targets, and one of the targets is that we need to grow our incomes into higher middle income. Currently, we are at a lower middle income. So we need to grow our economy, and one of the ways to grow our economy and to reduce poverty actually is through trade. So indeed, there is a relationship between efficient customs or trade facilitation and poverty reduction. And if you look at what is happening is that if we can be able to, as KRA has made that presentation, that time has been reduced, cost has been reduced in Kenyan companies accessing, let's say, raw materials, or even taking goods out of Kenya, then it means that all of us have a duty actually to support the works of KRA with the great success we've already had. You've heard Caro talking about Kenya improving on the ease of doing business. And I think as government, we still have a target to come to top 50, in the whole world. So that means we still need to do a lot of work. And in terms of why we need to sell goods out of Kenya, I was just looking at an analysis of our local market, and I realized that the local market is only 0.006% of the world market. If you take the Kenyan population, even if we could assume and say by 2017 Kenyans are 50 million, the market share, the Kenyan market share is only 0.06%. What does that mean? It means 99.994% of consumers actually live outside of Kenya. And that means then we all need to focus on, developing our products and ensuring that we sell out of Kenya. Now, if you look at the issue of efficiency in customs, that is a necessary but not a sufficient condition for us to achieve what we need. What we need to do is that on top of, creating efficiency and coming up with systems like the ones we have currently in our country, then we need to also look at competitiveness within the country so that we can be able to, enhance what is going out of the country. Now, if you look at what is happening currently, we actually import more than we export. As we speak, the trade deficit for the country has actually been growing. I know that one of the objectives of the third annual tax summit is to see how then can efforts around efficiency in the ports contribute to our country's macroeconomic stability. And how do we achieve that? We can achieve that by ensuring that we sell a lot of our products out of Kenya. And as we speak today, I know we are still at about, around last year, we did about 1.37%. We have come up with targets. We've seen that if we need to, achieve a balance of trade in the next 5 years, then we need to grow our exports by 20%. And growing exports means empowering and making our companies stronger. And that contributes to the revenue targets of our country, because if we can be able to establish stronger farms in our country and establish more efficient ports, because there's also a relationship between an efficient port and attraction of investment in an economy. Because many investors would not like to go to countries whose customs are not efficient. They cannot be able to sell their products out of those countries efficiently. Then it tells us how important all of us actually have to contribute. Now, what are we doing so that we can be able to contribute to the development of exports in the country? One thing which Kenya can brag about is that all these achievements you've heard about the ease of doing business and others is because of a very strong public-private engagements and dialogue. And as you look at even creation of efficiency within, ports or development of export, the critical mass to have sufficient exports for the country, then there is need for public-private dialogue, not at the end, because sometimes we speak to, exporters and business community, and Caro and Phyllis will actually attest to this, that we need to bring our engagement, and this is one of the objectives of government going forward, that we need to begin even at the inception phase of the initiatives that we need to bring so that we can be able to improve on our ports or improve on the business environment in our country. So yes, we have a lot of work to do so that we can be able to improve on exports. This is the only way a country like ours can be able to move to the next level. I know all of you are aware that we have a target of 10% under the Vision 2030. We are doing around, on average, 6%. So we still have a lot of work to do. And I think this conversation will bring us to more convergence and more work to achieve this. Thank you.
Thanks, Biot. I want to stay with you. You speak about exports. One of the concerns we've had as a country, and I think listening to the president's speech yesterday, I picked that, is the issue that we export a lot of primary products. Value addition in a number of our products is quite low. If you look at tea, which is our key export out of the country, only 2% of our tea is value added locally. If you look at coffee, it's the same scenario. So a lot of our value opportunities lost in value addition. Leather, I think when the study was carried out for the KITP, it identified that if you value add leather locally, the value increases by about 12%. So as the Export Promotion Council, what can we do to ensure that even as we grow exports, we are growing value added exports out of this country?
Thank you very much. I think that's one of our critical objectives going forward. What Kenya has really suffered from is, a narrow range of products for exports, and as you rightly say, low value addition. Now, what we need to do as a country is that, and I think we are at the right time, because as we speak, the country now is going to focus on manufacturing. What we need to do is that we need to support, manufacturing farms. We need to support value addition in our country. There are so many incentives that have actually been generated. You can think of the Special Economic Zones Act, which has actually been passed. You can think about, the export processing zones where investors are actually being, invited to invest and then, create value for our products. And value addition does not necessarily only mean manufacturing. There is need for more Kenyans, to enter into the space of, value addition. But one challenge that we want to focus going forward is that we need to look at, the supply of raw materials, because you realize that sometimes if value addition initiatives have to succeed, we need to begin from even, the production of raw materials. As we speak today, one challenge that we face as a country is that we get orders. We can get a lot of orders, for our products, but are we able to sustain? So we need to build all systems along all our value chains so that we can be able to, produce enough, provide incentives. And I know currently there are a lot of initiatives within government. The IDP Capital Limited, with the partnership of the government of India, have actually a grant of about 1.5 billion Kenya shillings to support SMEs to acquire new technology. Because as we seek to value add, technology becomes very important. And technology is expensive, so there is need for, provision of, incentives. And as a country, we are coming up with, Export Development Fund, which is being seen as a priority currently, so that we can be able to support exporting firms to diversify and to enhance value addition of their products.
Thanks. Let me just add from what Biot has said on the issue of value addition. I think one of the things will have to be a paradigm shift. If you look at development economics theory, it talks about comparative advantages. And so countries focused on what advantages they had. And that, unfortunately, has left us behind as African countries, as Kenya, in terms of, because our comparative advantage was to produce this bulk coffee and bulk tea and all that and sell it, so we never moved to value addition because someone else had put the machinery, had put the systems, the technologies, and they would do that and sell back. But in terms of pricing and cost, where the money is on the value addition, unlike on the bulk primary goods. And so that has to be a paradigm shift for all of us who are producing, and even for us as Kenyans to say, we need to move to the next level of value addition because that's where we can have, we can make more money as a country, well for the country, but also as businesses, but also for our people because it's very hard for me today with the trade logistics and all to be able to move my vegetables to maybe Wajir or somewhere, but if I value added, dried them, packaged them, the people in Wajir can enjoy the same cabbages I'm enjoying here. Maybe not fresh right now, but at least they can do that. So we need to just change that and say the value addition is to the benefit of both the people and the businesses. And that whole idea of the development economic theory does not work in today's world because then some countries are being left behind. But secondly, so that's one. So there's a lot of sensitization to be done to the producers, but also to the people. But also, again, the issue of our exports. Today, I talked to a lot of exporters who say they face a lot of challenges through the whole export process. And so if we don't streamline that and make it easier, so we're talking about all the streamlining and the ease of doing business at the port, we need to continue to do that so that it becomes so much easier and more attractive for people to want to export than to just produce and consume locally because the process is too hard and too expensive. So that's the second thing that will really, really help us to move from there. And thirdly, I think the one thing that I think government can really, really do is that whole issue of incentives for anyone who wants to export so that there's attraction to export, but also there's desire to want to do it. Because when you talk to a lot of people who are growing even French beans, they say the process is too hard. I know there is someone in France who wants these green beans, but I can't just comply with the process. It's too complicated, it's too expensive. So that process just has to be really streamlined.
Thank you very much, Caro. I think that was a very useful addition that we need a step change as a country. We must do things differently and see how we can value add, streamline our export procedures, and really provide incentives so that we have a reason to export. So I'm coming back to Commissioner Musyoki. We've had very glowing things on how KRA is doing extremely well, and we are proud of you. However, I think growing up, one of the things my parents said is becoming number one is very easy, but maintaining it is very hard. So what are some of the things, over and above what you've told us, that KRA is looking at into the future as we look at this step change, as we look at growing exports, expanding manufacturing? What are some of the strategic things you're going to do going forward to ensure that we retain the momentum?
Thank you. Adding to what I mentioned during my opening remarks, we are geared towards being among the customs of the 21st century. And the systems we've put in place, which I indicated will be enhancing efficiency by saving on time it takes to either import, export, intervene, etc., will be very beneficial to the business people, the traders, the importers also, the transporters also, because they'll be saving on the time they spend on the road. And going forward, we expect to have a paperless customs. And once you have paperless customs, it means even the importers themselves should be able to access our system and do their own self-declaration without necessarily incurring the expense of engaging a clearing agent. Now, we are not only looking at the clients and customers, we are also looking internally. As we do the technology transformation, we also understand that the people who work with the systems, our staff, need to be changed. So we are twinning the transformation with staff change management programs are in place so that even as the systems take over their role, they don't feel that they are being retrenched, and so that they can have buy-in. We are also retraining them and reskilling them in areas that will be moved to once their roles are taken over by the system. So in a way, the future we have is where the systems will be the key drivers of operations and activities, and risk-based approach and non-intrusive inspection. And this will apply across board, both for imports and exports. Remember, we've had cases of cargo that is intercepted at the port or at the final destination in Singapore, etc., exported purportedly to be products that are very instrumental to our economy, but they turn out to be contraband, illicit, elephant tusks, etc. So this risk profiling, knowing our customer, doing the non-intrusive inspection will be able to safeguard the country, but not hinder trade. So it's a combination of efficiency and security, of course, through know your customer and through the efficiency of the systems they are putting in place. Of course, not leaving behind our staff.
Add a little bit. Sorry, because of where I sit, I just see many different sectors, so it's easy for me to just think of things in discussions that I hear the different sectors having. I think two other things that can continue this space and really, really help our exports and our imports, and that KRA can continue to do on the issue of efficiency and turnaround. I think we really, really need to reduce even further. And that will really increase trade and help reduce diversion of cargo. So that's another, when you're talking about efficiency, I think we need to move much further than we are today. I think numbers don't lie, so we're doing well, but we need to do better. The second one is seal the loopholes of tax evasion, widen the tax base, and improve revenue collection. Again, as I say, I like using numbers because numbers are easy to see, to relate, and easy to deal with. If we only improved the Kenya tax to GDP ratio from 19% to 30% without overburdening the private sector, we'll really start dealing with these issues. Let me give two examples of two countries that we could benchmark with. Denmark tax to GDP ratio stands at 46%. Namibia at 3%. So it's possible for us to get at least to 30%. And so really the whole idea that we need to focus on as KRA and us as your partners is to see ways to really seal the loopholes for tax evasion, see how we can widen the tax base so that we're not only focusing on the few that you have in your system, there's so many others doing business, but how are you getting to them, and improve revenue collection. And then again, I think as you mentioned about the team and the officers, it's continuous training. So at some of them who see this as like they're the police instead of a facilitator, they can move from that. And then consistency. And I'll give you a good example of a case that was brought to my attention this week. There's one of the companies, it's both, has local and foreign investors, and they are really focused on just producing small solar, then not really panels, but really helping more of the marginalized in terms of who are not accessing power and all that. And they've done this several times in terms of they've had clearance several times. Then they do this season, they do 2 containers, and then the 3rd container is stuck. Nothing has changed. Nothing in their system has changed. Nothing in their container has changed. So then you realize either they met a different officer who doesn't understand, and so that consistency is very, very important to facilitate business.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Caro, on touching on consistency, which is quite accurate. I'll allow Biwo to make a comment, and then we'll open up for remarks. Allow me to recognize the presence of the CG and also Mr. Mao from the ministry, I think representing the CS. Karibuni will continue with the panel discussion. Yes, Biwo.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it is also up to us Kenyans to be able to, to say that if we really love our country, then how do we support institutions to be able to achieve their targets? I've been able to read the KRA 7 corporate strategy, and it's talking about relationship building rather than enforcement. Because in most cases, when Kenyans see Kenya Revenue Authority, they become a bit scared and they don't want to cooperate and even support their initiatives. And just to add on the, a final point on the question of trade facilitation, in fact, if you look at OECD 2013, they have actually said that trade facilitation in developing countries can actually increase trade more than elimination of tariffs and non-tariff barriers. In their estimation, they're actually saying that trade facilitation in developing countries would mean a 15% reduction in the cost of trade, and that means about 4.7% growth in global GDP, and trade will grow by about 15%. On the contrary, if we invest a lot of energy only on pursuing elimination of tariffs, elimination of tariff would only contribute 0.7% to the growth of the global GDP, and only 10.1% in world trade. So we need to have a balance, and I think we need to focus more on looking at our domestic market. How do we make Kenya more competitive? Because if you look at evidence, countries whose economies are competitive are actually regarded as healthy economies, and they are able to benefit from international trade than those countries who are rigid within their economies, no matter how much so many agreements you sign. So the bottom line is we need to focus on our local market, and when we make our economy competitive, we are able to grow more farms. When we grow more farms, what does it mean to revenue authority? It means more jobs created, more pay as you earn, and more taxes. So we need to think about widening the tax rather than increasing taxes within 3 million Kenyans. We are 50 million Kenyans today. So why would a small percentage of Kenyans contribute to national development and the rest of us are enjoying, working around, and we're not making that substantial contribution? So it is all our business to ensure that we support institutions like Kenya Revenue Authority and government objectives to be able to raise that kind of revenue. Thank you.
Thanks, Biot. I think Biot has really created a case for trade facilitation and why it's more important than even just reducing tariffs, because it has the ability to grow trade much faster than reduction of tariffs. So on that point, allow me to open up to the audience for you to plug into the conversation. There's been a lot that has been said. What are your views? Is KRA performing? What more can they do? Because I think all of us have an end goal of growing trade. Inter-Africa trade is quite low. It's at about 15%. We need to trade more. And what we are discussing is one of the ways for us to do that. So I'll allow the members of the audience, kindly put up your hand if you have a question or a comment or anything to weigh into this conversation. So we have someone at the front. If there's a mic, kindly move to the front. I'll take about 3 questions at a go so that we allow the panelists to answer them together. So we have someone at the front. Any other question? 1 there. 2, 1, 2, 3, but all those are men. I need a lady to ask a question for gender balance. Any lady with a question? Okay, I'll allow the 3 gentlemen to go, and I've seen also 2 hands on this side.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I want to start by applauding the presenter and the very thoughtful insights from the panelists. I just have some few observations which might take the form of questions too.
You'll give us your name, sir?
My name is Joseph Ghana. I am from the Ministry of Finance, Republic of Cameroon. I serve as the Director of Revenue Enhancement. My first preoccupation is we might have a situation where the Customs Administration has been doing everything to facilitate trade, to reduce delays, to make the territory attractive. But in the ports area, there are so many other actors that intervene, transit agents, brokers, and the like, and who may be a source for delays. I don't know what is the situation in Kenya. If that aspect has been handled, maybe they give us some insights on what strategies they use so that others could copy the best practices. My second preoccupation is I want to use the discussions of this panel to link it with the previous exposés that we had, the presentation on big data analysis and even on transfer pricing. You know, the customs administration is really a source of data, heavy data that can be very, very much used by the domestic revenue mobilization authority or agency. I am coming from a country where the customs administration is independent of the tax administration, even though under the Ministry of Finance. So I don't know your situation here, whether the domestic revenue agency have direct access to the customs data, or there is a platform of collaboration to that effect. And of course, my last preoccupation will touch on audits, which is a source of concern between the revenue authorities, whether customs and domestic revenue, and the taxpayers, the business community, and the like. You know, the number of audits, the number of actors that intervene to a taxpayer is a source of concern as far as doing business excuse me to say, is concerned. Ideally, taxpayers will want a joint audit that comes at once and they finish with that and can do their business without any problem. Do we have joint audits between the customs administration and the tax administration to the taxpayers so as to avoid the multiplicity of actors that interplay as far as revenue mobilization is concerned from the business community? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joseph, for the questions. We'll move to the two gentlemen on this side.
My name is Moses Mwangi. I'm an agriculture economist from Moi University. I have two questions. One for Mr. Julius Musyoki, Commissioner for Border Patrols, and the other one for Ms. Carol. Taxpayers expect services from the government in respect of tax revenue. This in turn improves the tax compliance culture. So since you have introduced the Integrated Customs Management Systems, which is ICMS, so what increment do we expect in respect to the revenue which is collected? Because we believe since it is an efficiency, it's an efficient system, we hope that it will of course bridge some gaps or maybe some loopholes. It will seal some loopholes which were there before when we were using the other systems. So we want to know by what rate or by what percent will the revenue from the customs improve. The other question is to Madam Carol. Some members of Nairobi business community said that you had segregated them from the Kenya Private Sector Alliance, and they also contribute the turnover tax and other form of taxes, even though they are informal. So how do we ensure an inclusive form of association which is doesn't like favor one side or another? Thank you.
Thank you for that. Another question, there was a third one here.
Thank you for the talk. One of my questions has been asked.
Your name, sir?
Evans Kimasop. I am a farmer. My question is simple. Some of the components we use for farming, feeds for our animals, some of them pass through Mombasa and they go to Uganda. Yes? But we still find it cheaper to buy feeds from Uganda than find from local in Kenya. Could you explain why taxation is still fair? Because I come from Eldoret and most farmers there take their feeds from Uganda, and they say it's because it's very costly in Kenya than in Uganda. But you guys to wonder why is the feeds passing through Kenya all the way to Uganda, then we bring back to Kenya is cheaper. Why?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for those questions. I think let's take those so that we respond to them. The first three, I believe, were targeted at Commissioner Musyoki. We had the questions from Joseph from Cameroon. He wanted to know how you're handling the issue of interagency collaboration at the port. He was also interested in data and whether you are sharing data with the domestic tax. I'll ask whether you can also share with the business community some data for decision making. Then for audits also, whether we can have joint audits. Then there was another question from Moses Mwangi, also directed to you, Commissioner, on whether we expect more revenue collected from ICMS. Then to Caro, there was the question on how we bring more informal sector players on board. And then lastly, the issue of feeds being cheaper in Uganda than Kenya. Maybe Biwot or the Commissioner can also respond.
Okay, thank you. To Joseph. Yeah, it's true. We have various actors at the entry point in Mombasa. Our main port is called Mombasa. We have the clearing agents. We call them clearing agents here. They are normally licensed by the Commissioner for Customs. And therefore, for them to access the port, they must produce that authority by the Commissioner. They are given a license, and therefore the port operator will accord them access to intervene or pursue the cargo that they were clearing through that authority. Now, to make the work efficient, what we've done, as part of the improvement, we brought all the stakeholders together as early as 2011, 2012, so that when there is inspection of cargo to be done, all the stakeholders that are involved are brought together at one stop. We've created a one-stop center at the port of Mombasa, so that the port, the customs, the police, if they're interested, the port health, the plant inspector, the Bureau of Standards, all of them are hosted in one area. And therefore, if they have interest in cargo, because they might not have interest in all the cargo, then they indicate what cargo they have interest in. And as you saw in the new system, there will be the ability to intervene by putting an input remark in the system that I would like to be enjoined in the verification. And therefore, what has happened, we've reduced or removed the earlier process where clearing agents used to walk to the port and do their verifications at random as they wish. So we have dedicated hours where everybody converges, the inspection is done. Then there are 3 shifts at the port of Mombasa. And this has brought order and reduced the haphazard manner in which things were being done, and therefore created more transparency and efficiency. So that is how it is being done. In terms of customs as source of data, the new system you've seen, one of the integration is to be with our domestic taxes department. Right now, the information is in standalone systems, but with the new system, we've already integrated, and therefore, any data from customs, in terms of the importers, in terms of the clearing agents, in terms of the cargo volumes and cargo values, all that data will be available and will be seamlessly accessed by the domestic taxes department. And this now will remove the current situation whereby we have so many people who are not in the tax bracket, yet they are trading with us. So we expect going forward, we'll have control and information will be available so that we can expand what we've talked about as the tax database. Joint audits. Currently, this is done jointly. We used to operate the way you alluded to. Each department goes, does their bid, the other one goes, and then you find the taxpayer is inconvenienced, but this has been resolved by having the audit plan done in a manner that any department that has got interest communicates with a central unit, then the audit is done jointly to avoid the inconvenience of the taxpayer. If customs has got an interest, if domestic taxes have got an interest, they sit together, they evaluate the issues, and then the teams from those departments move together so that they don't make different trips to the importer. Moses, ICMS, yeah, I indicate the ICMS will be a game changer for customs. It will incorporate the risk management module. It will take care of the valuation aspect, which touches on the second question by Evans. And I talked about the non-intrusive inspection. So when all these approaches are put together and the system is integrated with the system, the ICMS is integrated with these systems, then it means the loopholes that have been existing either through diversion of transit cargo, which is taken care of by the regional electronic cargo tracking system, concealments that have been taking place will be detected through the scanners, and the integrity of the process of intervention will also be seen through our CCTV cameras I talked about. When you integrate all those, then it means we close the loopholes, we reduce the gaps that have been existing and the avenues that have been existing. And that should bring me to a level where I can say I'll be able to collect almost 99% of what is collectible. We can't say 100%, but we'll have the confidence of saying that we've collected all that is collectible to a level of 99%. Therefore, the measure will be my ability to meet the targets set by the National Treasury through sealing those loopholes. So I might not give you a percentage, but the target is to seal all those loopholes and collect all that is collectible and achieve my target, which is set by the Treasury. Mr. Kimosop Evans. Well, we have those discrepancies in terms of valuation, which now we are addressing through a common valuation approach across the partner states. We are developing a harmonized valuation system so that goods that come from the same country, when they go to their respective importing countries, have the same value. The distortion is what causes those differences that you are seeing. The other discrepancy that causes that variation is diversion, which we are addressing through the regional electronic cargo tracking system. If somebody has paid taxes on an item that you've mentioned, and somebody else has declared it for transit and takes it to Uganda without paying taxes and manages to sneak it through the porous border, then that person is able to undersell the one who paid taxes, and therefore you're likely to get it cheaper. So our aim is to seal those loopholes through the initiatives that I've indicated, and therefore bring harmony and uniformity in the operating field.
Thank you very much. I think another thing just to weigh in on that is harmonization of domestic taxes, because you'll find certain products where Kenya charges VAT and the partner states don't. Clothes is one of the examples. So it's cheaper sometimes to buy them in other countries. So the initiatives to harmonize domestic taxes do need to be expedited if we are going to reduce that. So I'll move to Caro first, and then what you want to add to that, Karibu.
I just needed to add to that one another perspective. Well, I'm not so much fast with this, but I think Kenyans are highly entrepreneurial, and I think our middle class sometimes don't spend a lot of time to negotiate, and they go and buy. So if you go to an entrepreneur in Kenya, you say, I want animal feed without negotiating, of course, definitely they will give you a higher price. If you say, yes, I want to buy. So that can also be a reflection of the fact that Kenya are highly entrepreneurial. So it doesn't necessarily have to be related to tax. Well, it could be related, but it might not be related. It could be something to do with how our country is.
Thank you, Biwot.
Okay, let me answer this question. I think hearing this question being asked here, and it's been asked in many places, I take responsibility that we don't communicate too well, sometimes of who we are and what we do. So let me just clarify that KEPSA is an umbrella body of the private sector. So far, we have almost 100 associations from all the different sectors, and the members of these associations are large and small, all the way to micro. And one of our members is Juakali Association. We also have been trying to really put together the micro and small enterprise, and so we created a federation, which we are hoping to continue to grow. But what are the other things that we've also done for this sector, the informal sector, and what our plans are? We actually championed and wrote and took to Parliament a private members bill in 2012, that created the Micro and Small Enterprise Act 2012, which we are hoping and continue to work with the Ministry of Trade and Industrialization on it in its implementation. And again, it's really to help the big informal sector, which creates more than 60% of the jobs in this country and employs more than 80%. And so for us, it's where the growth is where the jobs are. The other thing that we have done and are working on two things. We're working on an SME policy index. Again, it's a focus on this sector. A lot of them are in the informal sector, and really so that we really know who they are, where each different levels are, so that we know how to help them and work together with the different agencies. We're also working on a program called the SME Maturity Program, and the idea is that we know most SMEs do not last more than 5 years of their existence, and we want to be able to grow them. I always say for every Microsoft, it started as a micro-organization. So for it to get to a Microsoft, what was done to make it to get to that level? And that's what are the things that we need to do. Lastly, we have categories for this sector in KEPSA, where we have 2 levels apart from all the other levels, we have the startups and for the SME categories, because a lot of them tell us we cannot afford the membership that the different and the medium and the bigger associations and companies afford. And so we have created that category, not only for them so that they can afford to be members of KEPSA, but also so that through our business hub, a unit we started last year, they can be helped to grow and mature.
Thank you very much, Caro. I want to testify that we are, as BMOs, doing what we can to really bring the SMEs on board. We also run a business growth program. We're creating opportunities for linkages and subcontracting, and there's a lot that is happening. So we do need the informal sector and SMEs to grow because they're really the engine at the moment of the economy. So I'll take 3 more questions and then wind up this session. If there are any, 1, 2, Weru, 3. Is there a lady whose hand? No lady has a question, okay. There's one I'm looking at.
Sorry, I don't wear a skirt. I don't know what to do about that. But yes, just in terms of export processing zones.
I'm sorry?
In terms of export processing zones. My name's Keith. I talked earlier, sorry. I will talk a lot too much. But yes, in terms of export processing zones, how successful have they been to actually get investment? I know there's a narrative that says all incentives are bad, but sometimes a lot of companies come for these incentives. Do these things generate actual, productivity and revenue, or are they just a dead weight loss? And the other thing that I see that in Africa we struggle with is that in a modern world, you have to have a supply chain. The businesses are interconnected. So that oftentimes when we put trade barriers, we're putting trade barriers on products that actually hurt us for our exports. For example, it takes a certain amount of goods to actually resell other goods. So if you kill and you make imports too expensive, you can't actually add value because you don't have enough of the ingredients. When we set our customs policy, do we take into account the needs of other businesses for imports?
Good afternoon. I'm Anthony Weru. My question is to Mr. Julius Musyoki. As it has been rightly been said that efficient custom systems facilitates trade, which in turn increases your revenue base. In terms of export and import, there is always an issue of HS classification disputes. And at the same time, the disputes around duty payable by an importer or an exporter. Most of the times, those disputes add up through the normal judicial system, which is time-consuming, and at the same time, it increases the cost. What has KRA done, or which are the strategies that have they put in place, or that are already working, in order to resolve some of these disputes without going through the normal judicial system? Thank you.
My name is Francis, CEO Reef Limited. My question goes to the Export Processing Council, Export Promotion Council. I wanted to find out, because I believe out there we have a lot of entrepreneurs who are, are doing very brilliant works, like say the kiondos and the wooden craft aspects, which includes also the women who are exporting their green vegetables and stuff. I believe you need to venture into a lot of creating awareness in terms of in terms of just linking up the markets to local entrepreneurs within the Kenyan aspect to just help them diversify some of their products within the international markets. And the second one is we were taken through the integration aspect of big data when we were taken through the first sessions on KRA. I believe now that the president had announced that we can, by our IDs, we can go regional and do our businesses and the likes. Is there, you as KRA, how are you also going to integrate other countries like Uganda, Tanzania, and the likes towards just having businesses cut across the board? Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll take the last round of questions. So there was a question on EPZs, how they operate and whether they've been successful. The issue of the supply chain and the trade barriers. I think each of you can weigh in on this as we take your closing remarks. Weru had a question on the issue of classification and disputes and what KRA is doing. There was a question from Francis directed to EPC on the issue of kiondos, and I think Biwot can pick that up. And lastly, from Francis also on how we move regionally. So as we respond to those questions and close, I just want to throw in the issue of transparency and corruption. That is something that is the elephant in the room that we can't run away from in some of these discussions. What are we going to do as a country moving forward to ensure that there's transparency in the customs system so that all the efforts we are putting in place actually bear the fruits that we seek them to? So you can respond to the questions and give your closing remarks as we end.
Let me respond to the one by Mr. Weru. The dispute resolution. What I would like to tell Mr. Weru is that we have revamped our alternate dispute resolution unit division to the extent that most of the cases that have been pending in the courts for many months and years are being withdrawn through consent to be resolved at the alternate dispute resolution. It has been given a high-level management through the Legal Services and Board Coordination Office. And we've seen quite a number of cases resolved with very, very impressive yields, both to us and to the clients. And therefore, what I want to reassure this gathering is that our ADR mechanisms are working efficiently, and we expect going forward we'll have less and less cases finding their way into the courts. Integration in the East Africa. As I mentioned, we are doing integration of various aspects of customs, and among them will be all issues touching on valuation, issues touching on client data, issues touching on harmonized system classifications, cases that are detected. Our investigations across the partner states have got forum where they meet, exchange intelligence, exchange ideas, and also resolve issues that cut across in terms of case fraud cases and many other omissions that occur. So yes, going forward, we expect to have an integrated system led by the EAC Secretariat, which is the coordinating body for the partner states, and we should be able to get on board all the aspects of the operations that exist within our partner states. What I can also say is that even before that comes into use, we have a very elaborate system of exchanging data with the partner states, such that if we have any suspicious cargo or they have any concerns about cargo that they expect to be going to their place, we have a seamless way of sharing the information with each other. And therefore, going forward, we expect this to be a well taken care of area in the harmonization. Integrity, transparency. If you remember, I talked about the system being transparent, replacing human intervention, eliminating monopoly, eliminating discretion, because where we have a monopoly, where you are able to do things as an individual, and you're the person who can only make a decision, then those are the catalysts for corruption. So the transparency of the system will be a major drive towards eliminating corruption, because things are done on board. There are various levels of supervision. I talked of the scanner being controlled and managed from headquarters. So there will be less propensity to manipulate the findings on the ground, because somebody else is doing that at headquarters remotely. The CCTV cameras, again, we are interlinking them with the ICMS and the command center, so that when the scanner shows something to be scanned, the person in headquarters is able to see the same container number, the same exact location pointed out is what is being pursued and intervened on. And therefore, these are some of the measures that will bring into account the operations, and the transparency will be improved. And to add on to that, again, we have a division that's quite robust. It deals with all aspects of intelligence and integrity issues. So it's a combination of systems and, of course, accountability by holding people to account.
Thank you. Julius?
Thank you very much. In my closing remarks, I'll respond to three areas. One is on the issue of the EPZs. I think for me, we must acknowledge that they have been a source of jobs for Kenyans, and they've created a lot of jobs. There's also a big push now to say, if they are creating these jobs, they're also creating goods that are enjoyed mostly by those who do not live here. And in our case in point is the textiles. And we've been saying, how can Kenyans access these same textiles instead of, and have a choice. So do I buy a microcause that is secondhand, or can I get a microcause that is new and the price is comparable? And so that's an experiment that we are working together with government to see how we can do that, because it's about time that we started addressing or having what we produce. But secondly is the push to the SEZ, and the world is moving a lot to the special economic zones for many reasons, but I'll give three. One, there are those investors that are very specialized, that produce very specialized goods and services, but they need certain integrated services and infrastructure. And so they'll only move to a country or a place when those things are there, they're integrated in one place. So the idea of SEZ is to start attracting those investors, because they are big. Like now we're looking at one of the largest, I think the largest pharmaceutical company in the world that is interested to come to Kenya. And the only reason they're coming is because we have talked to them about SEZ. And so they're interested to come into an SEZ. But also the SEZ, because of that and the weight and the difference between them and the EPZ, they also create a lot of jobs, because in this integrated place, there are a lot of other businesses, support businesses that are there, and services. And those are creators of jobs, even though they may be this one big organization. And so that's part of some of the things that are really exciting to us to have both EPZs, but also a lot of SEZs, because of just being able to attract a lot more jobs for Kenyans and being able to create a lot of this around the country. The second thing is on the issue of transparency and accountability, the issue of corruption. I think this is something that as a country, we cannot drop the ball. 2 years ago, we worked as a private sector and initiated the anti-bribery bill, and that went through Parliament, became an act. The challenge is always the implementation, and so we are determined to make sure the implementation happens. And during that time, when we handed it to government so that it could become a government bill, we did come up with 10 areas, together working with government under the Presidential Roundtable on what we call the 10-point agenda on anti-corruption. And we've been monitoring and following those areas. And so there's some good improvement and some good implementation, but there's a lot to do. And so we as a private sector, one of the big agendas that we are taking for the next 5 years, because after every cycle of government, we go back and say, what have we achieved? What haven't we achieved under the National Business Agenda? And then we create the next National Business Agenda and say, what are the key areas? Where is the country at? Where is business at? And what should we focus and what shall we carry over from the old National Business Plan? And so corruption will feature really, really big. And also because the country is also discussing it, the country wants it dealt with. So we as a private sector who are part of the giver and the taker of the corruption, like every other Kenyan, want to play a big role. So we'll be doing that. And I think the Commission has mentioned, pushing a lot on the e-platform, moving away from a lot of human interaction, especially where public service is concerned and government services are concerned, and interaction between business and government. So moving to that, and we've seen KRA really, really push hard on that, and we're really grateful, and we'll really continue to work with them on that. And then really, again, the idea that we have is also have the carrot and stick, both for officers in government and for business. You know, for those who comply, what are the carrots, so that we encourage more people to comply? What are the sticks for those who do not comply? Because you'll always have a bad or two bad potatoes in a sack. You'll never have a clean sack. But what do we do to make sure that the whole sack is not dirty? And the last one is PPD. That was mentioned earlier. Public-private dialogue. What KRA mentioned today about the work they have done, it's because we've worked closely with them. And as for us, that is a platform that we believe delivers the impact that we need. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let me move first. I've seen Linus there. Yes, as is, export processing zones have actually succeeded. The biggest room on earth is the room for improvement. We can always do better. And I think there are emerging trends within EPZs and SEZs and other form of export promotion. On the issue of on the issue of imports will continue to be very important. But I think as a country we need to shift, and I think the economy will become more robust if Kenyans also start producing and value adding and exporting their own products, so that we can participate fully in international trade, because we are equal shareholders in the marketplace of global trade. Now, in terms of the question by Francis, actually we are scaling up our activities around enterprise and product development. EPC this year is doing 109 farms. We have done as far as, Turkana. We've done in Kwale. We've gone around the country. Over the last 5 years, EPC was able to reach out to 4,000 enterprises. And since we were established about 20,000 since 1992, we are now trying to innovate and see how we can get resources so that we can be able to scale and see how we can be able to reach, many Kenyans. This year, some of the SMEs will be going to Ethiopia, the Addis Ababa International Trade Fair, and others in textile will be going to the UK, leading a big exhibition in the UK, with the support of EPC. Now, on my closing remarks, I think the question of trade facilitation is all our business. We need to join hands and work together as Kenyans. We are currently employing what we call all-of-government approach, and we are also calling on the private sector to do the same, all-of-private sector approach. And I think, as J.F. Kennedy said, what we need to do is not to think about what our country can do for us. We need to think about how what we can do for our country. And sometimes when I see young people burning roads and doing all sorts of things they do over the last few weeks, we need to be the custodians of public goods, so that when a road has been done, when infrastructure has been done, like the standard gauge railway, you should not be able to be, we should be able to protect it like our own property. Sometimes I wonder why some of these things happen. And recently when Jack Ma came to Kenya, he said actually entrepreneurs do not need infrastructure, they create infrastructure. And I want to call upon young Kenyans to embrace the concept of business. There's a paradigm shift. You have a higher value when you talk about job creation and not job seeking. So we need to create this paradigm shift so that a lot of Kenyans can be able to depart and focus on job creation. And as a country, I think it's time to stop adoption of all size fits all. We need to look at global best practice and come up with what is good for Kenya. and what can be implemented so that our country can actually be able to move, to the next level. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, all the panelists, for all your contributions. I think as a parting shot, what has come out clearly is that we need to continue partnering to make these things happen. And also for KRA, one of the things I must say, I've worked in camp for 5 years, and I've seen KRA transform. It's really become about facilitation and relations and really trying to address these issues. So I want to congratulate them for the work they are doing. There's still a lot that lies ahead, but we are all with you as a business community. God bless you all.
Once again, let's warmly applaud this very wonderful panel that has led us through a very engaging discussion this afternoon on enhancing customs systems for efficiency in trade facilitation. That was from my extreme right, Peter Kibet Biwott, Chief Executive Officer of EPC. Next, Carol Kariuki of the Kenya Private Sector Alliance. Phyllis Okega, you did very well in moderating. But Musyoki got a lot of airtime for some reason. And indeed, the last gentleman here and panelist is Commissioner of Customs and Border Control at KRA, Julius Musyoki. Let's applaud them again. As I had mentioned in the beginning, we had turned this upside down, and sure, you can now take your seats at the audience. We just turned our program upside down by starting with a panel discussion, and then we'll end up with an official opening ceremony. This is still absolutely appropriate, considering that this forum, this summit, is only starting today, and there are more sessions tomorrow and the day after. So I want us to acknowledge the presence and arrival of the Commissioner General, Mr. John Giraine. Let's clap for him. I also want to recognize the presence of Dr. Geoffrey Mwao, the Economic Secretary. They'll be making their remarks shortly because this now marks the beginning of the official opening ceremony. And then after that, we'll actually close and resume tomorrow. So we're not opening and starting some panel discussion after this. So to get us started, I want to invite the KRA choir to please come to the front here. The choir will perform or lead us in singing the national anthem, after which I'll be able to call in our speakers to make their remarks for the opening ceremony. Let's clap for the choir as it makes its way here. Thank you. The choir will also help a lot of us who are yet to transform. Because these days in this country and 4 other nations that belong to the East African community, the tradition is to sing the national anthem and the East African anthem. And I think we got a whole lot of 100,000 plus people yesterday whose knowledge of this song or lack of it was tested yesterday when we sang the national anthem, and after that, the East African community anthem. We will start, and we should start bothering with knowing the words. Let's start with our national anthem. Over to the choir. Let's all please be upstanding for the anthems. Yeah.
Uhuru nasi tujitoe kwa nguvu. Nchi yetu ya Kenya tunayoipenda, tuwe tayari kuilinda na tujenge taifa letu. Ndiyo wajibu wetu. Kenya istahili heshima, tuungane mikono pamoja kazini, kila siku tuwe na shukrani. Mungu twaomba uilinde Jumuiya Afrika Mashariki, tuwezeshe kuishi kwa amani, tutimize na malengo yetu. Jumuiya yetu sote tuilinde, tuwajibike, tuimarike. Umoja wetu ni nguzo yetu, idumu jumuiya yetu.
Thank you very much. Let's clap for the choir. They've done very well. As they leave the stage, it's now my honor to invite to the front here the Commissioner General, Mr. John Jiraine, Dr. Geoffrey Mwau, the Economic Secretary, Dr. Mohamed Omar, Commissioner for Strategy, Innovation, and Risk Management. Please make your way here. Dr. Edward Sambili, Chairman of the Kenya Revenue Authority Board. Mr. Seth Tekpa, Board Member of the ITIC and former Minister for Finance of Ghana. Mr. Wilfred Musau, Managing Director, National Bank of Kenya. Please make your way here. Thank you very much. We'll now go straight to the opening ceremony speeches. And the first remarks will be made by Dr. Mohamed Omar, who is the Commissioner in charge of Strategy, Innovation, and Risk Management at the KRA. And indeed, Dr. Omar is our host for this event. Dr. Omar, please come over here and make your remarks. Let's welcome him with a warm round of applause.
Okay, thank you very much. Chief guest, the representative of the Cabinet Secretary, National Treasury, the Chairman, KRA Board of Directors, Commissioner General, Kenya Revenue Authority, board members, KRA, the President or representative of the International Tax and Investment Center, CEO, National Bank, heads of African Revenue Administrations and Finance Departments present, speakers, panelists, and all delegates. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to welcome you to the third tax summit. This year, there's a slight departure from last year, for example, from the second tax summit, in that we have now collaborated with the African Tax Dialogue organizers, which makes this event a Pan-African event. So we're happy about that. If we just flash back to the second tax summit, we did have comprehensive discussions, a set of panelists, various thematic areas, and we had a number of recommendations. I don't want to dwell on all of them, but just to highlight that we've been able to implement the recommendations. In your packs, there's a summary of what has happened and the action points that emerged from the second tax summit. But just to mention one of the recurring themes of the second tax summit was the need for predictability and continuity in tax policies and laws. I'm happy to inform the delegates that that particular recommendation has been able to inform the ongoing income tax review. For we are trying to overhaul our income tax in the country, and that particular one, the issue of predictability in terms of laws and policies, has been a guiding principle, one of the guiding principles in overhauling the Income Tax Act. So that shows that our discussions here and interactions among panelists and the wider audience is having direct implications on policy. Now, why do we have, briefly, I want to touch on the rationale for the tax summit. As you are aware, tax administrations worldwide are transforming because the market is transforming, the society is transforming. There is a big shift towards data-based decision-making. And the issue of analytics that we saw earlier today is a key impetus for us to have this, because increasingly data is playing a central role in decision-making and in management of tax administration. So therefore, it's a very important reason why we have this. Secondly, we are trying to create a platform where we can have dialogue. If you look around, you'll see that we have people from academia, we've got industry people, we have got tax practitioners, students, tax authorities. So this is a platform where we come together to dialogue on the issues that pertain to tax administration. Thirdly, information and knowledge are playing increasingly critical roles in the way tax administration is managed. So therefore, knowing that nobody is a repository of knowledge alone, we are here to discuss, share insights, share experiences and ideas so that we'll be able to enhance how we do taxation, how we administer taxation. Now, in order to achieve that, we've got a number of thematic areas that we'll be discussing over the next 2 days, and then we will have a master class in the third day. To mention some of the thematic areas, some of which happened earlier today, those of you who were here earlier had the opportunity to listen to discussions revolving around transfer pricing and illicit financial flows, which is a focal point worldwide today. You've been able to listen to the power of analytics and advanced analytics in tax administration. Other areas, of course, and it came up in the discussions that just finished, is taxing the micro and the informal sector. How do you tax them, and how do you support them? Another area, and given the fact that we've chosen the route of devolution, is resource mobilization in the counties to enhance socioeconomic development. So these are some of the areas in which we'll be discussing. In the masterclass, you'll see, again, another nascent industry that is gaining prominence, the oil and gas sector, the extractive sector. There'll be a session on that as a masterclass, thanks to our colleagues from the Africa Tax Dialogue. So these are some of the areas that will be discussed over the next few days. So mine is to once again welcome you to the third tax summit. For those who are coming from outside Kenya, you are very welcome to the country. And I wish to stop there and hope for a very fruitful discussions. Thank you very much.
I think we can clap in a warmer fashion than that. Thank you. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is the Managing Director of the National Bank of Kenya. Please let's welcome very warmly Mr. Wilfred Musau.
Thank you, Linus. And honorable guests, Dr. Geoffrey Mwau, the Economic Secretary, guest of honor, the Commissioner General today, Mr. John Giraini, the Chairman of Board, Kenya Revenue Authority, Dr. Sambili, other commissioners present, and board members, honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here to represent National Bank, but it's important first I tell you why National Bank and why we are here. National Bank of Kenya, as you know, is a bank that was formed in 1968. It cuts across the entire counties of this country. And we've had a relationship, a partnership with KRA for the last 15 years as the largest facilitator of collection of revenue and seamlessly being able to transmit that revenue to Kenya Revenue Authority. Of course, a relationship we don't take for granted. Secondly, I'm here because through that partnership, we do appreciate the relationship we've enjoyed over the years. And we saw it important to be able to support this initiative and to support the third tax summit as a platinum sponsors. And thirdly, I'm here to represent National Bank, who is also a large taxpayer to KRA, through KRA to the government. And we pride ourselves being part of the tax ecosystem. And today, we are very delighted to have partnered with you, KRA, and all the guests and other taxpayers to be able to support this initiative, together with the African Tax Dialogue, whose theme is quite insightful, and I'm sure you'll be able to have good discussions as you get to the end of first day and tomorrow the second day. With the theme of rethink, remodel, and rebuild our systems for sustainable economic development is a very welcome theme. Looking at what we do every day, we do it for the common good. Doing what we do every day, we do it sustainably for development of all the stakeholders in government. As a financial institution, we've continuously invested in efficient collection systems to ensure that we offer the service efficiently and to avert any revenue losses and to continuously facilitate the good relationships between KRA and the taxpayers. As I said earlier, we pride ourselves to be the largest out of the over 40 banks to be collecting over 50% of the revenue that is paid through the Kenyan systems and banks every single year. A record we've kept over the years, and we really thank and appreciate KRA for that opportunity to continue doing business and facilitating for them. As you'll see on page 6, we've invested in really very good collections and payment systems, which we continue to invest in, so that we remain relevant in supporting the adoption of technology and being able to really ensure that whatever you pay, then there are no issues around reconciliations and any gaps which have existed in the past. Over the years, of course, we've continued to see KRA grow from the manual processes, and we've journeyed together towards improving the even integration with the e-tax systems, and now looking forward to be able to invest, even journey together in the new investments they want to be able to invest in improving tax collection. I think, ladies and gentlemen, mine was just a few remarks to be able to appreciate all of you, to be able to really appreciate KRA, to be able to appreciate the government and work together for sustainable development and to work together as stakeholders. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Let's thank Mr. Musau once again. And as we do that, let's welcome Mr. Seth Tekpa, board member of the International Tax and Investment Center, and is also a former Minister for Finance in the Republic of Ghana. Tekpa.
Thank you very much. representatives of the Minister, Commissioner General, and officials here present. As the immediate past Minister for Finance in Ghana, I think it's only appropriate on behalf of the people of Ghana to extend warm greetings from the Republic of Ghana and to congratulate the people of Kenya, for the transition that took place yesterday. We look forward to more collaboration with, Kenya going forward. Personally, my involvement with the ITIC, as it is, popularly called the International Tax and Investment Center, whose chief executive, as Mr. Danwit, has deferred to me in this forum. I joined the board only this year to present, this message to the session. I had a session in the morning. I must say that my first interaction was as a resource person, for ITIC, in which I made a presentation, on tax administration. And what struck me at the time was the interaction between business and tax administration. I continued until my job did not permit me to continue in that role and in other roles. That role, I must say, I am a tax administration official. I began as a tax administrator. I belong to the Ghana Revenue, institutions, and went through various stages and then joined the IMF. And I must say that one of my proud moments seeing what is going on today was leading missions, to East Africa. I was a mission chief at the Fiscal Affairs Department in Revenue Administration. And I'm quite, happy personally, together with ITIC and its sponsors, particularly Coca-Cola, to congratulate, KRA. I did missions at the founding of KRA. Sewawero at the time, first Commissioner General, I believe, Ministry of Finance. One name I remember is Mr. Martin Gumo and others. So I do really have a very warm heart for the development and progress that has taken place within the East African community. I left the fund to join the government as Deputy Minister and a Minister for Finance. This morning, I did say that a number of African tax administrations have got to the point of maturity. And my reason for saying this in the morning is that the first wave of reforms took place almost 3 decades ago within context of the Washington Consensus, when a number of our countries were engaged in structural adjustment and economic recovery programs. We streamlined our tax policies, and we started the reform of revenue administration. I saw the streamlining of tax policies, particularly tax structures, to define the role of excise tariffs, to define the role of corporate income tax, and to define the proper role of sales taxes, which later became value-added taxes, in the country. I was a coordinator for the introduction of VAT in Ghana when it was introduced, and that took me to the IMF. Then we followed with functional administration. Those of you who are here, moving away from tax-type administrations and into revenue authorities. And I say that a few of these countries, including KRA, must come to a point of maturity, Uganda Revenue Authority, Ghana Revenue Authority, and others, and lead the way. First, because many of our countries are becoming middle-income countries, and we cannot continue to have tax administration and policy platforms, which represent those of developing countries. Whether we like it or not, the world is going to consider us as middle-income countries. We are going to see erosion of resources, particularly grants and concessional financing. And domestic resource mobilization, the theme of the SDGs, is something which is real for the middle-income countries of Africa. But the other reason is the progress that we have made. I believe strongly that we have made progress. And I think we must move beyond the technical assistance and support that continues to emphasize the very rudimentary, tax regimes, tax programs that we have. And I'm not saying we should dispense with it, but this morning I called for the internalization of basic principles within our tax institutions, particularly our training institutions, so that countries like KRA will lead the continent in terms of the development of tax administration and tax policy, lead other countries who are behind, and move our revenue administration to the middle income bracket, because that is what these countries represent. One simple statistic is therefore that our tax to GDP ratios, that is, if we rebase our GDPs, which often lead to a decline, must take us above 20%, no longer in the 15 to 17%. It cannot sustain the development, efforts. But once we internalize it, then we can have time for special initiatives, such as the BEPS process and others which are taking place now. Because I did mention the context of tax treaties, which has turned into multilateral treaties, and Africa must be at that table, together with strengthening its apex body, which is the African Tax Administration Forum, and other regional organizations like the EAC, which does so much in coordinating taxes. Finally, Mr. Representative or President of the Minister, let me also end on another note. I think it was hinted this morning. Taxation is part of the fiscal system. And as somebody who moved from tax administration into fiscal management, and thankfully, because as an accountant, I give some attention to expenditure management, we are not to integrate just domestic taxes, systems, processes with customs systems and processes. We are to integrate them within the whole structure of fiscal administration. And in this regard, I would call for KRA to look beyond taxation and integrate its systems into the IFMI system, which we were told this morning is taking place. It should be integrated into the functional classification, the chart of accounts, the coding, because you cannot talk about fiscal without starting from taxation. It's the tax revenues that come in, and when we look at the budget, it's about revenues, expenditures, and financing. And I think much of the effectiveness and efficiency, I think we were told today by the IT official from KRA, the enormous advantages that comes with integrating KRA systems with the IFMI systems, which tracks those who do business with government and who often may not be paying their fair share of taxes. Therefore, I am home with where I began as a revenue administrator, but with an eye on public financial management as a larger context in which I would like to entreat, KR, so I said G for Ghana, K for Kenya, to strive towards. Dialogue is very important, and this is a context in which the new ITIC, at its last board meeting, pledged to work with African tax administrations. There have been a presence on the continent. There have been some controversies regarding its role, but their mandate has always been, as I said in my first engagement, their mandate has always been to bring business to the table to have a dialogue. And I did mention a topic like advanced pricing beyond transfer pricing this morning. And I think these are the areas in which one would hope, that industry, business, I can see that it's already taking place, would be in the context of client services friendly to KRA, but mindful of the fact that one of the mandates of a tax administration is also enforcement and compliance which compliant businessmen need not fear. I thank you for the opportunity to join this workshop. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I just want to add that Mr. Seth Ekpa had a very interesting session this morning, got us to a very, very good start with our presentation and the panel discussion. And for that, we thank him, and we should clap again for him. Now, moving on, one thing that has not been mentioned today is the strategic plan of KRA, the current strategic plan, which basically shifts from enforcement to building of trust and facilitation, which is part of this year's annual tax summit discussion that brings about the 3 R's, that's rethink, remodel, and rebuild. Part of the process here is to try and help create awareness as well on tax policies and reforms that are being undertaken by the KRA. And who else and best placed to explain what the priorities are in these next 3 days than the Commissioner General of the KRA. Let's put our hands together as we welcome Mr. John Giraine to make his welcoming remarks. Welcome, Commissioner.
Thank you, Linus, and good afternoon, all of you. Good afternoon. First, I would like to extend apologies for not having this session earlier. We were still seeking to engage with the Cabinet Secretary for the Treasury. He had other commitments, so we were looking at diaries, but happy enough to have his representative here to support this program that is very important. I'm aware that, in fact, the conversation regarding having this conference, the ITIC conference here in Nairobi, arose out of a discussion that our Cabinet Secretary had with, I believe, the President sometime early this year in, I believe, Washington, and they did agree that Kenya could offer the opportunity to host this event, and we found that it was a good opportunity to try and link up what we were doing as KRA through the tax summit discussions with the ITIC initiative, so that we could have maybe a more robust conversation that includes not just Kenya but the entire Africa. And I would really like to thank Richard Buddy for having helped in facilitating this idea about us working together to hold this as a joint workshop. So I'll make some formal remarks, and then maybe then we can engage during the question and answer. First, to thank everyone who has been involved in organizing this conference. Chairman of KRA Board, Professor Sambili, the representative of the Cabinet Secretary, Dr. Geoffrey Moa, who is a Director General at the Treasury responsible for budget, fiscal and economic affairs, Mr. Daniel Waite, President of the International Tax and Investment Center, and Honorable Seth Chapa, the board member of the ITIC and the former Minister of Finance, a colleague from the National Bank, and I would really like to thank you for supporting us. It is true that we have actually worked with the National Bank. They have been our strongest collaborator over the years, even during the original days when KRA was moving towards a cashless tax administration. Because many may not know that there is not a single cent of tax that we collect today and touch it with our fingers. All the money we collect is collected through the banking system, and we don't have cash offices today. And that has been part of a process to try and reduce the kind of problems that the private sector raised earlier. Carol talked about it, and Phyllis, about corruption, because part of the biggest problem you have when it comes to handling money is when people touch it. And today I'd like to confirm that not a single cent of what we collect is touched by anyone at the Kenya Revenue Authority. So I'd like also to welcome the heads of revenue administrations who are with us here, our guests from Africa, and all those who have joined us, including colleagues from the University of Nairobi, which I should confess here that I was once part of the teaching fraternity in this university. I'm pleased to have the opportunity to address this auspicious event where you are discussing issues of very great importance to the global tax community. Let me acknowledge our partners, the International Tax and Investment Center, with whom we have partnered in hosting this summit. And I wish to pay special tribute, as I said, to Richard Bade, who is my colleague and the former Commissioner General of the Tanzania Revenue Authority, who has tirelessly worked with us to make this collaboration a reality. The subject of taxation, especially its international dimension, has over the last 10 years acquired prominence on a scale never before witnessed, with governments moving closer to creating unified international responses. This convergence of global attention has been driven largely by the complexities which are engendered by technology and the operations of large multinational corporations who have access to top-notch technical advice on how to minimize tax exposure through complex business organization schemes. And therefore, the need for governments to be able to counter that. And really the challenge that we face as countries is the fact that when you're dealing with a company that operates across, say, 50 countries, they have seamless knowledge about the terrain across those 50 countries. And you're dealing with them as an individual country, and yet they know what happens across 50 countries. So your knowledge is so limited, acting alone, when you're working against an institution that has got that kind of very broad international knowledge and exposure. So the idea about bringing the international community together is to acquire the same kind of knowledge and competence and capacity that these global conglomerations have got, and so that they are then able to know how they work and how they operate in different countries. So there are many conversations that are emerging regarding how this should work, including, for example, the idea about having comparability and the publication of information about comparability that allows, for example, Kenya to see what those multinational companies, for example, publish and report in other jurisdictions, meaning that then you can be able to see, to have more transparent information regarding whether what they say is the truth, and even also what they publish in Kenya. Other countries can be able to see it, and you can also be able to see what they say they publish in Kenya, meaning that we create more transparency across the globe, and the companies are not able to cheat and misrepresent the information that they publish across jurisdictions. Let me also note with appreciation the fact of the hosting of this event at the University of Nairobi, which is Kenya's citadel of learning and an institution that ought to play a critical role in the advancement of knowledge in all spheres. And I hope that we have colleagues here, as I said earlier, who are from the academic community in this university. My comments in this regard are informed largely out of my past experience when I served as a lecturer at this university slightly over 2 decades ago. At that time, interaction between academia and business was frowned upon, with academic purists arguing that universities existed for the sole purpose of advancing knowledge and not for the facilitation of commerce. In those days, academic staff who engaged in consultancy or other business activities were negatively perceived as persons intent on polluting the academic space. In fact, they were called academic dwarfs. I was in commerce, and I know that we used to have that problem, because in commerce there was a lot of interaction between the teaching fraternity and business by the nature of what you used to do. And yet, in today's increasingly complex world, universities can play crucial roles in helping business and governments understand how to navigate through complex environments by providing valuable targeted research services. In our case, we have been seeking to cultivate collaboration with universities in a manner that helps us outsource research activities so that we focus on our core business of collecting taxes and not doing research. In this manner, both universities and ourselves would stand to benefit through research that is more relevant and geared towards solving society's problems in a practical manner. I would therefore like, through this forum, to appeal for greater collaboration between universities, businesses, and government, with a view to ensuring more synergy in the resolution of our national problems. And for example, one area I have been thinking about where this collaboration could help, and we're still discussing that, including with the Treasury, is, for example, in the manner in which we discuss double taxation agreements and other international agreements relating to taxation. Because the point is that to be able to reach some of the discussions we reach regarding what to give and what you don't give, and other aspects that are involved in those negotiations, obviously which happen under the auspices not of just taxation, but the general promotion of investment, research by universities can help a lot. And so, for example, even when we are creating a national delegation to go and discuss an investment agreement with a country, we're thinking that it should be broad-based, so that it's not just government, it's business, it's academia, it's people who can do research and match the kind of negotiation competencies that you find in other countries, in other delegations, which I think would be better for us in the long term. And these are conversations, as I say, that we've started, so that we ensure that, for example, when we enter into some of these international agreements, and we are discussing with countries that have seriously invested in understanding us, then we know that we have also invested seriously in understanding them, and also in understanding how anything we sign with them or any concession we give to them will impact us going forward. So I think it would be a very, very good thing for universities to become part and parcel of national dialogue to help in resolving issues, especially even in this fiscal area. Turning back to the program for this event, it is evident that the next 2 days, there were 3 days, obviously, we'll witness vibrant debate in a variety of subject areas, ranging from international taxation to the role of customs in global trade facilitation, which was just held this afternoon. In this regard, and with the risk of being repetitive, the KRA's approach has over the years been to act as a key player in global discussions on these and other relevant subjects, whether you're talking about international trade facilitation, cooperation in global tax initiatives, and many other areas. We therefore act as key players, not just at World Customs Organization deliberations, but also increasingly at forums where international cooperation on tax matters is a subject of discussion. Within Africa, Kenya and KRA are regarded as providing leadership on international tax cooperation under the auspices of the Global Forum on Tax Information Exchange, and also at the United Nations Committee on Global Tax Cooperation. Indeed, due to KRA's active role, Kenya occupies seats on both of these bodies. First, as a member of the steering board of the Global Forum since 2010, and most recently as a member of the UN Tax Committee with effect from August this year. Mr. George Bell, who spoke at this forum in the morning, I believe told you that he was recently appointed through our nomination to serve on the UN Tax Committee, which is it's really the governmental response to international taxation challenges. And I have been serving on the board of the Global Forum on Tax Information Exchange since 2010. And last year, when we are due to be rotated, to be replaced by another African country, that forum was so keen to retain us that they had to create an additional seat for Africa so that we continue serving, because of the impact that they have seen that we have helped to create in this area. We were also the second African country to join the Global Forum after South Africa, and we have been active players in its activities, including in the recently launched Africa Initiative, which is aimed at helping African countries combat illicit financial flows. The Global Forum has just 2 weeks ago completed its annual conference, which was held in Africa for the first time in Cameroon, at which key discussions took place on interventions required to support Africa in addressing illicit financial flows, an initiative in which Kenya has been identified as a key mover within this continent. And the Global Forum has now become a very key agenda for the G20. Every time the G20 meets, for those of you who follow the activities of the G20, there is always a communique that is issued in reference to the work of the Global Forum, because countries now globally have realized that this platform is so important for enabling the global community to address international taxation challenges. So we are proud as a country to be a pioneer and to be a respected pioneer in this respect within Africa. I would also like to mention that we also had the Africa Tax Administration Forum's working group on transfer pricing, and we are also helping ETAF, which was mentioned by the Honorable former Minister of Finance, as a key institution now that African tax administrations are using to help in addressing our problems as a continent. In terms of capacity development to address international taxation, we have since 2009 invested in training a core of subject experts, now numbering over 30. And our experts are very good. We have also undertaken extensive work on legal and institutional reforms to support operations in this area. The reforms include extensive amendments to transfer pricing legislation and the publication of requirements for companies to disclose their transfer pricing policies to KRA in advance. This helps us to be able to assess risks and to be able to advise those companies about areas that we would like to see changes, so that we minimize the risk that we could have disputes with them regarding their transfer pricing activities. We have also established a fully fledged international tax unit, which is headed by Mr. Obel, with a mandate to focus on policy and institutional strengthening, besides the unit carrying out audits relating to international taxation. Due to these and other initiatives, we have seen major improvement in compliance levels amongst Kenyan multinational companies in respect of transfer pricing operations. The subject is also very strongly appreciated now amongst our staff, a good number of whom have been invited to speak at international forums. We really, I would say proudly, have got very, very good experts in this area. And yet, just 10 years ago, we didn't understand this. And it's knowledge that we have developed as homegrown. Besides this, we have also managed to raise significant taxes from our audit activities, with a cumulative amount of almost 25 billion shillings having been raised since inception of our operations in this area. Now, on matters to do with global trade facilitation, KRA has prioritized global cooperation and the use of technology as key drivers in this regard. We are therefore, through the WCO, active players in global customs initiatives on trade facilitation. We have also played a leading role in facilitating easier cross-border trade within the East African community through the implementation of the now very well acknowledged Single Customs Territory Initiative. And for those who have been following, particularly within this region, the impact that the Single Customs Initiative has created has been tremendous. Our neighboring countries, the landlocked countries, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, and even South Sudan, the cost reduction has been incredible. We have been able to reduce time to deliver cargo to Kampala from 18 to 4 days. So you can imagine what that means to those countries. We've been able to reduce the number of interventions they used to have. They used to make declarations to 3 customs administrations, for example, if you come from Rwanda. Today, they make a declaration to one revenue authority, their home revenue authority. And yet we are continuing to operate. We've been able to address and reorganize to address the challenges that this presented. So we are very, very happy about the fact that in this area we are leading, to the extent that even the World Customs Organization in global forums talks about this initiative as an example of how countries can improve. So we have the capacity even in Africa, I believe, to deliver best practice to the world. And we have done it in this respect. At the local level, Kenya Customs continues to invest heavily in technology and process reforms to support more efficient operations. Among the key ones include the rollout of a seamless transit cargo tracking platform for the 3 EAC countries of Kenya, Uganda, and Rwanda, and we expect that we shall be rolling it out also to Tanzania and South Sudan. We are also presently, as we speak, rolling out a new state-of-the-art customs management system, which I believe the Commissioner of Customs did talk about, and is going to have very different features from what we have been using. And as we speak again, we are in the process of implementing an automated platform for the management of cargo scanning operations. We have already commenced discussions to explore opportunities for placing cargo scanning on one common platform across the EAC. And that means, for example, that, and I believe the Commissioner talked about this, in the past, and it's still happening today, when cargo is scanned in Mombasa, which is our point of entry, we here in Nairobi at the customs headquarters do not have a view or knowledge about what has come out of that scanning. And that obviously creates serious problems in terms of the ability of customs to control its business. Now we're changing that dynamic. So the future, and that's not the very too distant future because we expect to be there by March or April, is that what is scanned in Mombasa or at any other border point is available to the headquarters in real time. And they can see what has been scanned, they can see the results, they can interrogate, they can take control of the process and give instructions regarding what they want to be done about the results that have come out of that scanning. Whether they want it to be scanned more, whether they want the container to be opened for verification. And we're saying that that should not just be available to us in Nairobi. That should be available to the Uganda Revenue Authority in Kampala. So their cargo comes through Mombasa. They do not need to wait until it gets to Kampala for them to be able to see that cargo. So they can do the same things that we do in Kenya, in Mombasa, and be able to take the same decisions that we would take here in Nairobi. So for us, we see that the future, particularly about customs, is investing a lot in technology, which is then going to help us, not just to take control of the process, but to make it more objective. We are also investing substantially in staff culture change programs with a view to helping staff appreciate the need to treat taxpayers as valued clients. And I did hear the comments that were made by Carol and Phyllis regarding inconsistency in the way in which we act. And it's an important thing. But the only way you will not avoid inconsistency for as long as you are dependent on manual operations. The only way you can be able to effectively address inconsistency is by introducing technology tools that help you to make interventions on an evidence basis. not on an ad hoc basis, because inconsistency comes because one person knows something, the other one doesn't know it. But when you use technology, what you do is you standardize the approach that you use in making your interventions. And that is why we are so much focused on investing in technology. Finally, let me touch on technology and technology utilization generally. At KRA, we have defined technology as an imperative that is basic to the success of our business. Technology use, therefore, for us is no longer a choice, but a necessity. This approach is itself informed by the fact that given the volume of transactions we handle, technology provides the only practical intervention that can help us deliver holistic solutions. To this end, KRA has implemented in programs aimed at digitizing its operations with the automation program encompassing all aspects of our operations, whether you're talking of customs, whether you're talking of domestic taxes, whether you're talking of the management of transit cargo, whether you're talking about the cargo scanning, whether you're talking about, name it. We are putting everything on digital because we believe that is the solution. Importantly, we have undertaken this with a very clear objective of ensuring that there is seamless linkage between technology systems so that we can enable data and intelligence sharing. And that question was asked earlier by the delegate from Cameroon. Does domestic taxes know what customs is doing? The new system that we are now rolling out for customs is getting linked into the domestic taxes system. So it's not even just going to be about does domestic taxes know that what customs is doing. What you're saying is everything customs does gets into the domestic taxes system, so that the data for customs also resides within a database that everybody can see, whether it's data about exports, whether it's data about imports, so that if I'm importing goods and I'm meant to make VAT declarations because I'm selling those goods, that information about what I'm importing is already profiled in my domestic taxes profile. And so if I don't make declarations for VAT subsequently after importation, then we go looking for you. Because you are doing business, but you're not giving us the other side of the story. So seamless linkage, which is quite important for the purpose of ensuring that you have a 360-degree loop in terms of how you deal with taxpayers. Presently, we have commenced a program to reorient staff work practices towards the new digital era, a process that involves the remodeling of jobs, the remodeling of organizational structures, and the reskilling of staff. This program, which runs under the banner of the KRA Transformation Agenda, will, once fully implemented, have fundamental impacts on the way we work and relate with taxpayers. And I know the previous panel did actually mention this whole issue about the transformation agenda. We are now almost 1 year into running with it. Very exciting, very interesting, but obviously probably the last but most difficult aspect, because digitization alone does not deliver the solutions. The people must also change to align with technology. We expect in the future to have less through this transformation agenda. Essentially what we are telling staff is that we need to do things differently, because the kind of technology we have invested allows us to do things differently. So in the future, we expect to have less intrusive work practices. We expect to be more objective in the way in which we make interventions. So we will not have inconsistency in terms of our interventions. We also expect to have less disputes with taxpayers, because our interventions will be evidence-based. And for example, as I was saying, for cargo verification, for example, which I know is one area where we have been having many questions with taxpayers. Why are you stopping my container to be opened? And then it has to spend maybe 10 days at the port. In the future, we'll be able to say, open that container because the scanner has told us there is something inside it. And we have evaluated, experts have looked at it, they know there is something inside. So if you have nothing inside the container to raise suspicion, your container will never be opened. And if we open it, we'll tell you the reason why you're opening it, because it's objective and the evidence is there. Unlike now when somebody might say, let's try that one. Or maybe we had, let's open that one. And maybe even the information you may get as intelligence may be incorrect. That kind of benefit will also extend to areas like the selection of taxpayers for audit, which has also been another area where, you know, taxpayers are being concerned because some say, you audit me too much, but you don't audit the others. You don't audit my neighbor. But I see every year you are sending me notifications about audit. So again, data-based, through the linkages, for example, that we are having with INFMIS, collecting data about those who are doing business with government and who we don't see in our tax profiles, collecting data about people who are doing business with private companies through our withholding VAT system, and who we don't see with the tax profiles. And so when you tell them, we'd like to have a conversation with you, we are telling you we'd like to have a conversation with you because of the following reasons. We have seen you have done business with government, with this county, with this private company, and we have it all in our system. And yet we don't see it in your tax profile. We also finally expect to provide greater enablement to taxpayers for self-service with attendant reduction in the number of public complaints and also in the costs of doing business. In respect of this latter aspect, we are pleased to note that the improvement in global ranking for ease of paying taxes for Kenya from position 125 to position 92, which substantially contributed to Kenya's improvement in the 2017 Global Cost of Doing Business ranking, was really driven partly by the kind of things that we've done. Because we were able to reduce our ranking for paying taxes from position 125 to 92. That is 33 places in 1 year. And this is because of technology investments. We expect that that trend is going to continue as we continue addressing technology and using technology more efficiently, using technology also to address issues to do with the question of trade, reducing the time for trade across borders, which is also one of the indicators. Our goal, in as far as paying taxes is concerned, is to achieve a position 50 ranking by December 2019, so that we can also help Kenya in its goal to achieve position 50 in the cost of doing business ranking. Let me just briefly, before I conclude, and touch on an issue that again was raised by Phyllis regarding corruption and what we are doing, and as you rightly said, which is the big issue, the elephant in the room. Really, our approach to corruption is to address it strategically rather than in an ad hoc manner. Because sometimes some of the things that we talk about when it comes to addressing corruption may not necessarily address the problem, because they are more like treating the symptom rather than the disease. And so we have focused specifically on dealing with the reasons. And I'd like to talk about maybe two, three issues. One, our strategy is to address as much as possible opportunities that create, or rather, situations that create the opportunity for human intervention or human discretion. Because it is when you have human discretion that then you have a problem. Now, in doing this, you are using technology as one of the ways to reduce this. Because when you use technology, then you reduce the scope for me to decide I would look at that, not that one. So your discretion is then driven by the evidence. So investment in technology is key for us in as far as addressing the issue of corruption is concerned. The second thing is by enhancing the collection and management of intelligence. Because, again, because issues to do with corruption are not issues that you publicly know about, the only way in which you can be able to address it effectively is if you create a framework that helps you to understand what's happening. So we have invested in restructuring intelligence gathering operations so that we purposely focus on creating a structure that has got the capacity, the independence, to be able to collect information, process it, and use it in the right manner. Whether it means, for example, that there is a need then to undertake an investigation, whether there is a need to undertake interventions that involve staff who may be involved in corruption and so on and so forth. And that is supported, again, both by technology and also by structural reorganizations internally. The third is by creating more transparent processes. And in his remarks, again, earlier, the Commissioner of Customs did talk about dispute resolution and what we are doing about creating an effective internal dispute resolution mechanism, what we are calling an ADR. Because dispute resolution has been one of the gray areas. And one of the areas we know there has also been serious concerns between us and taxpayers. So we have purposely created a structure internally where we have addressed issues to do with capacity, but more importantly also to do with governance. So that if you have a tax dispute, then the manner in which we handle it is transparent. It is not a conversation between you and the person who generated that dispute. It's a conversation between you and a structure that is open, which allows you to come and ventilate and talk openly about the dispute, and then your views can then be weighed against the views of the department or the unit within KRA that would have been the source of that. And finally, of course, the question internally of education. Spending more time in terms of sensitization, spending time on culture change, and we have, as I said, as part of our transformation agenda, there is a lot of time and effort that we invest rather in sensitizing staff on this issue. But we don't depend on that alone, because we know that sensitization, education alone is not going to deliver a solution. We also have to implement frameworks that prevent. Let me conclude once more by appreciating our partners, both local and international. The KRA organizing team led by Mohammed and Chris and those below them, and all of you who have found time to attend this function. For our external partners, both local and international, I wish to confirm KRA's determination to remain an active and genuine partner in our mutual quest to make taxation a more customer-oriented subject. Finally, I wish you all fruitful deliberations that should help us shape our tax landscape in the coming years. Thank you very much. So let me take this opportunity then to invite our board chairman, Dr. Enward Sambili, to make his remarks before the remarks by our guests from the Treasury. Chairman.
The representative of the Cabinet Secretary, Bwana Geoffrey Mwao, the Commissioner General of the Kenya Revenue Authority, the President of the International Tax and Investment Center Delegation, heads of African Revenue Authorities, senior government officials who are present here, private sector bodies that are present also here, heads of corporate bodies present, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I think our presentation has been made as Kenya Revenue Authority by our Commissioner General, and I think really it would be overdoing it if we were to go over anything else beyond that. I would like, therefore, to say perhaps the importance of this tax summit will be for us not what not exactly what we are doing, which we have been able to explain to you in very much detail, but it will be more of listening to what you are doing in other jurisdictions, as we've just heard from former Minister for Finance in Ghana, and also the other global players who are here. We look forward to keenly listening and hearing from you what you really see as best practice. I think together we can be able to come up with resolutions or the end results, to be able to see what should be our frontiers or next frontiers. For us in Kenya, I'm sure the representative of the minister will be able to say this. We have a very ambitious target to continue to raise revenue, and I think it would be very helpful for us if we hear from those of you who are coming from other jurisdictions what you have been able to do to raise revenue beyond, even to surpass the targets of your national treasuries. It's never been easy for us to really catch up and get to the next level. When we hear some countries are doing 33% of tax to GDP ratio, that to us sounds like a miracle, and we would be very delighted to learn how that has happened in some of these other areas. I happened to travel one time to Denmark, and when I heard about their tax to GDP ratio is about 40-something, somebody said it's over 40%, I thought, yes, I understand that, because they have a very strong progressive tax system that goes not to 30%, it actually goes to 65%. So at some point, I think it takes away most of your income. So I guess some of those practices, I don't know whether they would be best practice here, but we need to think about that. I think the other point we would be very keen is, for example, when it comes to our customs systems. You've heard about the technology, the issues we are trying to do. I think the way we see it is we would like to see great increasing business. We admire countries that have made their ports their biggest economy. They become the centers of world trade, and perhaps ideas around how we can actually generate not just the most productive, become the most productive sources in terms of customs revenue, but in terms of growth, how can we grow the cake that is coming from the customs? Because I think with the technologies that you have heard from Commissioner General and also Commissioner of Customs, we will sooner than later be getting to what he said, 90-something% of what is taxable, what is capturable, what is really fair to get. But we were looking at what else can we do that can induce and create increased business, which I think the panel was trying to attempt to talk about earlier. I would also say that we have at the domestic tax level, we're looking at the GDP, and then looking at what we are taxing, what we are getting in form of tax, and there's still a huge, in our view, space for getting more. But I think the issue is, someone I think earlier during the morning mentioned that the taxable business and persons are not more than 6% of the population. It's about 3 million people or 3 million persons. It means including business. So I think the issues around here is how can we bring more and more people into the tax bracket, people to be more willing, even if they're paying 100 shillings, even if they're paying 200 shillings, that they can actually feel like they're part of this economy, and not just pass passive, citizens. So I think those are issues we would really be happy to hear. I'm sure the panels are going to continue deliberating, but for us, we want to learn more than what we already know. We want to go beyond what we have tried out here in the Kenya Revenue Authority. We're glad to learn about these transfer pricing issues, platforms of how you have been able to minimize illegal transfers. I think these are very helpful, sources of knowledge for the KRA. So, ladies and gentlemen, the day is fast spent, and I would really like at this moment to take this opportunity to welcome my good friend, Dr. Geoffrey Mwao, who is representing the Minister for the Cabinet Secretary for Treasury. Karibu.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sambili. As you have been told, I'm here to represent the Cabinet Secretary, National Treasury. He was looking forward to be here, but another important assignment as a reason he had to meet with some of his cabinet colleagues, because as you all know, this is a very critical time in our budget process, and some things have to meet the constitutional deadline. So because of that, he missed it, and he asked me to come and make a statement and also send his apologies. So I'll go ahead and read his statement. Chairman, Kenya Revenue Authority, Dr. Edward Sampili, the Commissioner General of Kenya Revenue Authority, Mr. John Jiraini, President of the International Tax and Investment Center, our guests and the former Minister of Finance from Ghana, Mr. Seth Takpa, Mr. Wilfred Musau, MD of our National Bank, heads of African Revenue Administration present, senior government officials present, heads of corporate bodies who are here, and also colleagues from the academia, and thank you very much for hosting us. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I feel honored once again to be here with you today during this year's annual tax summit that has now become a tradition as a knowledge-sharing platform on tax matters. On behalf of the National Treasury, I thank the Kenya Revenue Authority for bringing us together to participate in this very important event, which is the third tax summit. Let me also recognize the International Tax and Investment Center for their immense effort and contribution towards this joint event, and also for assisting us in ensuring that tax coordination in our region is efficient. Ladies and gentlemen, let me at the very outset take this opportunity to underscore the critical importance of domestic resource mobilization in supporting high and sustainable growth of our economies. We acknowledge that we ourselves are first and foremost responsible for our own growth and development of our economies. And for us to attain the goals that we have set for ourselves, it is imperative that we strive to strengthen our revenue performance. For many of our countries, revenue performance remains low at less than 20% of GDP, and this will no doubt affect the pace at which we can grow and develop our economies. We therefore have no choice but make every effort to identify measures that we can put in place to turn this unsatisfactory situation around. And I think the Honorable former Minister actually has stressed that very well. In fact, when you were talking, I felt like it's my Cabinet Secretary talking. So I'm pleased about that insights that you have given us about, especially the fact that as Kenya, and just like Ghana, we are becoming a middle-income country, and we shall be seeing our concessional resources going down. So again, we must rely more on domestic resource mobilization, and that is very critical for achieving our sustainable development goals. So in the case of Kenya, for example, the Kenya Revenue Authority collected a total revenue amounting to 1.4 trillion Kenya shillings, which is about US dollars 140 billion, against a target of 1.46 trillion during the last financial year, which is fiscal year 2016-2017. The amount collected represents 18.2% of GDP, which is against a target of 18.9% of GDP. Compared to the financial year 2015-16, the revenue collection increased by 14.9%. But again, here, as you have heard from the former Honorable Minister, we need to up this number, or, indicator of revenue performance, to plus 20%, more than 20%. And I think that's something that even the Commissioner General has emphasized a lot, the kind of things that KRA is doing to ensure that we get over that threshold of 20% and collect more revenue with the kind of reforms that he has outlined very well. So while this performance is commendable, it is clear that 18.2% of GDP performance, with 18.2% of GDP performance, we are still below our full potential, and there is need to redouble our efforts. And in this regard, we need to intensify our reform efforts to broaden our tax base, make our tax administration more efficient and transparent, and take advantage of ICT innovations. In the last few years, we have undertaken many reforms that have helped strengthen revenue performance, but as I've just indicated, these are not enough. We are still not there. Some of the reforms we have made, and I think the Commissioner General has actually outlined them very eloquently. Actions like reforming our tax laws, including the VAT Act, Excise Duty Act, and now we have embarked on an overhaul of our Income Tax Act to modernize it. We have also made significant progress in digitizing our tax systems, and these efforts are beginning to pay off. I think also here the Commissioner General has made a very clear and pleasing presentation on what the benefits, the payoffs from these efforts are, and the potential payoffs that are coming. And also in this regard, we have also put in place technological innovations to enhance tax administration, including what has also been mentioned, the regional electronic tracking system, integrated customs management system, iTax, and accessible goods management system. But as I have just said, what we have done so far is not enough, and we need to do more to exploit the full, to the full the power of ICT especially. We need to ensure that these systems that we have put in place are interconnected in order to make use of the information that these ICT systems generate, because I believe that this will go a long way in eliminating tax evasion and bringing every eligible taxpayer to the tax net. This, combined with other administrative measures, will no doubt help in enhancing our revenue performance to that level above 20% that we've just mentioned. Ladies and gentlemen, another area where we need to focus on is e-commerce, which remains a challenge, not only in Kenya, but globally. The reforms should respond to the external pressure to adapt to the changing business environments that may not have been sustainable. It is important to note that the challenges that face tax administration in Kenya are not much different from many other developing countries. With increasing prevalence of globalization and technology-enabled economic activities, governments all over the world lose billions in revenue every year because of harmful tax practices. This affects both developed and developing economies, and therefore, plugging these tax leaks requires both domestic and international cooperation. So, ladies and gentlemen, on the international and regional front, I would like to know that Kenya is a member of the regional tax blocs, such as the Commonwealth Tax Association, in the American Center for Tax Administration, and Africa Tax Administration Forum. Kenya also has strong cooperation with OECD and the United Nations. Additionally, the country is a member of the Inclusive Network for the Implementation of BEPS recommendations. The relationship with these bodies has provided forums for the country to benchmark its services to international standards. And again, here we have heard where Kenya stands in the international forums in terms of tax matters from the Commissioner General, which is very commendable. We commend KRA very well for that. Kenya is cognizant that exchange of information is critical in building efficient tax administration and assists to protect and broaden the tax base by deterring potential tax avoidance schemes and enhancing revenue mobilization through access to critical information. To this end, Kenya joined the Global Forum on Transparency and Exchange of Information for Tax Purposes in 2010 and committed itself to meet the international standard on exchange of information upon request. To facilitate automatic exchange of information, Kenya is currently undertaking the requisite legal and administrative reviews, and we have also embarked on a journey to widen our treaty network, not only for purposes of eliminating double taxation and attracting investments, but also to enhance international relationship with other states. Ladies and gentlemen, we are aware of the rapid advances in global economy in recent years, largely driven by technology. As a result of these technological advancements, e-commerce has become a key sector of most economies in the world today, and this has not only transformed the traditional ways of doing business, but also the relationship between tax authorities and taxpayers. Changes in the tax industry mirror pervasive changes in the society and even globally, including shifts in technology, prevalence of rapid innovation and entrepreneurial activities. And on account of these rapid changes, the traditional tax systems, and particularly international taxation arrangements, can struggle to keep pace with globalization and market liberalization. So, ladies and gentlemen, as I've just indicated, Kenya is among the first countries in the world to aggressively start building an IT ecosystem in order to ease tax administration while at the same time enabling taxpayers to comply. In addition to our quest to facilitate taxpayers to comply, it is the challenges of taxing internet and mobile-based transactions that have forced us to identify practical and reasonable ways of applying internationally accepted taxation norms to e-commerce and m-commerce. In this regard, we need to acknowledge that the issue of taxing electronic transactions is complicated by several factors, including pluralities of nations with varying tax systems, which create significant obstacles to compliance. It is therefore our duty to come up with new and feasible taxation methods which will allow consumers and businesses alike to easily comply with their duties as taxpayers. So, ladies and gentlemen, as I conclude, let me once again reiterate the critical importance of ensuring that we put more effort towards enhancing our revenue performance. This is the only way we can ensure high and sustainable growth of our economy and thereby raise the welfare of our people. I'm confident that this summit will provide the opportunity to discuss ways in which we can achieve high levels of revenue performance. Finally, I wish to commend everyone present here today. Let us all take advantage of this opportunity to share insights, experiences, and innovations on how to enhance tax administration through the application of technology. Thank you, and I wish you productive interaction in the next 2 days. And with those few remarks, it's now my duty to declare this summit officially opened. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mao. Let's put our hands together again for him. And indeed, I want to also thank the Chairman of the Board of KRA, Dr. Edward Sambeli, and the Commissioner General of KRA, John Jiraine, for their remarks preceding the official opening remarks by Dr. Geoffrey Mao, who represented the Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury this evening. I want to now make a few announcements in closing this session. The session was supposed to have come before the panel discussion, but again, we changed that, and I think it has gone very, very well. Let's put our hands together for the speakers. Tomorrow will be a very exciting day. There are a number of themes that are going to be tackled in session 4, which will kick off at 8:30, and I'm very happy to see Daniel Witt, President of the International Tax and Investment Center, here. He'll be moderating the first session, which will be on the bridging the nexus between tax governance and tax morale. And this, the Commissioner General has touched in his remarks, if you can go to his remarks in the program, talking about public opinion perceiving lack of return on investment on paid taxes. This issue will be coming, Commissioner General, to discussion tomorrow in the first session of the morning. Then the next session will be putting the county governments on the agenda when the discussion on harnessing domestic revenue for sustainable county development will be up for discussion. And finally, in the afternoon, a very, very interesting discussion that will be involving the role of professional bodies in enhancing domestic revenue mobilization. I'll urge all the participants to come in with a lot of energy because we'll be opening up the sessions for very interactive discussions. We will make the interjections from the panelists manageable in terms of the time to allow a majority of the participants to take part in this discussion. For day one, I want to thank everybody for playing a wonderful role. Commissioner General, I want to thank you for making time to be here with the team from Treasury and, of course, the chair of the KRA. So we will end it here, and we'll see you at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. Please be here in time for the first session, which will be moderated by the President of the International Tax and Investment Center. Thank you all. My name is Linus Kaikai. See you very early tomorrow. Thank you.
you.